Fall asleep to the entire story of Mycenaean Greece, the real world behind the Odyssey. Tonight, allow the modern world to grow quiet. Let the glow of your screen become softer. Let the clocks, notifications, and unfinished errands drift somewhere far beyond the edge of your thoughts. We are traveling backward, not hundreds of years, but more than 3,000. To a world where kings lived behind towering stone walls, where bronze flashed beneath the Mediterranean sun, where merchants sailed toward distant horizons carrying fragrant oils and fine pottery, and where every storm at sea could be explained by an angry god. This is the world before history became legend. Or perhaps, the world where legend quietly borrowed its furniture from history. Because long before someone recited the tale of Odysseus wandering across impossible seas, before Achilles raged beneath the walls of Troy, before Homer ever found the rhythm of his verses, there were real people. Real kings. Real fortresses. Real wars. And real families wondering whether the harvest would survive another dry summer. Tonight, we leave behind marble temples and philosophers wearing flowing robes. We are not yet in the Greece most people imagine. The Parthenon does not exist. Athens is still small. Sparta is centuries away from terrifying its neighbors. Instead, our story begins during the Late Bronze Age, around 1600 years before the birth of Christ, when mainland Greece was ruled by powerful palace kingdoms whose rulers called themselves something very different from heroes. Their title was Wanax. It sounded important because it absolutely was. The Wanax owned lands, commanded armies, supervised trade, organized religious ceremonies, and somehow expected everything to function despite an economy balanced on clay tablets that could literally dissolve in the rain. As administrative systems go, it was surprisingly optimistic. But perhaps we're getting ahead of ourselves. First, look around. Imagine standing on a rocky hillside overlooking southern Greece just before dawn. The air feels cool after the night. A faint smell of wild thyme drifts through the breeze. Olive trees cling stubbornly to the hillsides, their silvery leaves trembling in the early wind. Far below, narrow valleys spread toward the sea. Small farms sit among patches of wheat and barley. Goats wander wherever goats have decided property laws simply do not apply, which, to be fair, has been their policy for several thousand years. The mountains dominate everything. Unlike Egypt, where the Nile gathers civilization into one long ribbon. Unlike Mesopotamia, where broad rivers connect distant cities. Greece is broken. Fragmented. Mountains separate valleys. Rocky coastlines divide communities. Travel over land is slow and exhausting. The sea, oddly enough, becomes the easier highway. Every bay is a doorway. Every island another stepping stone. Every sailor learns that civilization here spreads across water rather than roads. The Mediterranean is not a barrier. It is the neighborhood. And somewhere beyond those glittering waves lie Egypt, Cyprus, Anatolia, the Levant, Crete, all connected through ships carrying copper, tin, ivory, amber, gold, spices, fabrics, ideas, languages, and stories. The Bronze Age was astonishingly global. Not modern global, of course. No one was ordering luxury goods from the other side of the world with a few taps on a glowing rectangle. But kings certainly expected exotic gifts from astonishing distances. Tin might begin in Central Asia or Britain. Copper arrived from Cyprus. Ivory traveled from Africa. Lapis lazuli had already crossed deserts and mountains. Luxury moved slowly. Yet it moved constantly. The Mediterranean breathed commerce. And Greece inhaled. Long before the Mycenaeans became powerful, another civilization already dominated these waters. The people of Crete. The civilization we now call the Minoans. Their great palace at Knossos was unlike anything mainland Greece possessed. Bright frescoes covered the walls. Storerooms overflowed with oil, wine, grain, and perfumes. Elegant staircases climbed through enormous palace complexes that seemed almost like labyrinths, which, naturally, inspired stories about actual labyrinths. Humans have always looked at impressive architecture and thought, there must be a monster somewhere inside. It's practically tradition. The Minoans were traders, artists, builders. Their ships crossed the Aegean with confidence. Their influence spread across islands and coastlines. Their writing, known today as Linear A, still refuses to explain itself. Despite generations of scholars staring very intensely at clay tablets, the script remains undeciphered. Sometimes history keeps its secrets. The Mycenaeans, meanwhile, watched. They learned. They traded. They copied. Eventually, they conquered. But before that happened, mainland Greece was changing in quieter ways. Small villages became larger settlements. Local chiefs accumulated wealth. Bronze weapons became symbols of authority. Graves became increasingly elaborate. Families competed not merely through survival but through display. Status mattered. Perhaps it always had. Imagine attending the funeral of an important leader around 1600 BC. The ceremony begins before sunrise. Relatives gather carrying precious possessions that most ordinary people would never own. Golden cups, decorated swords, amber beads from the north, ivory carvings, fine pottery, jewelry hammered from sheets of gold. Everything placed beside the dead. Not because anyone enjoys burying expensive objects. Quite the opposite. The gifts announce something. This person mattered. His memory deserves wealth. His descendants deserve respect. His family deserves authority. The funeral becomes political theater. Even grief has audiences. Archaeologists would discover these graves thousands of years later beneath what became known as Grave Circle A at Mycenae. When Heinrich Schliemann uncovered them during the 19th century, he believed he had found the resting place of Agamemnon himself. He was enthusiastic. Schliemann possessed many admirable qualities. Patience was rarely among them. The graves were indeed magnificent. Gold death masks covered noble faces. Bronze weapons gleamed. Intricate ornaments reflected remarkable craftsmanship. One famous mask became known as the Mask of Agamemnon. There's only one small problem. It predates the legendary Trojan War by several centuries. History occasionally smiles politely while archaeology clears its throat. Still, even if the mask never belonged to Agamemnon, it belonged to someone extraordinary. Someone whose descendants would eventually rule one of the greatest kingdoms in Bronze Age Greece. That kingdom stood atop a steep hill in the northeastern Peloponnese. Its name was Mycenae. Even today, walking toward its ruins feels strangely theatrical. The landscape narrows. The road climbs. Massive stone walls appear above the hills. Enormous limestone blocks stack upon one another with astonishing precision. Later Greeks believed only giants, Cyclopes themselves, could have lifted such stones. Hence the name. Cyclopean walls. Looking at them, it's difficult to disagree. Some blocks weigh several tons. Modern visitors instinctively tilt their heads upward. Ancient visitors probably did exactly the same. Architecture can be psychological. A wall does more than stop enemies. It impresses friends. It whispers, "Look how powerful we are." Imagine approaching Mycenae during its height. The afternoon sun warms pale stone. Bronze spearheads sparkle atop defensive towers. Smoke rises from kitchens within the citadel. The smell of baking bread mixes with charcoal fires. Donkeys climb steep paths carrying grain. Messengers arrive dusty from distant kingdoms. Soldiers patrol gates with polished shields. Somewhere inside, scribes scratch careful symbols onto damp clay tablets. Priests prepare offerings. Craftsmen hammer bronze. Children chase each other through narrow streets. Dogs bark. Merchants argue. Life unfolds beneath walls built to outlast memory itself. And towering above the entrance stand two carved lions. Or perhaps lionesses. Scholars continue debating. The famous Lion Gate remains the oldest monumental sculpture in Europe. Two great felines face one another around a central column. Silent. Watchful. Powerful. Every visitor passed beneath their gaze. Every ally. Every merchant. Every diplomat. Every frightened prisoner. The message required no translation. This kingdom was strong. Very strong. Yet Mycenae was never alone. Across mainland Greece, several palace kingdoms emerged. Pylos, Tiryns, Thebes, or Kaminos. Athens, though still comparatively modest. Each ruled surrounding territories. Each maintained bureaucracies. Each fielded armies. Each competed for influence. Imagine them almost like neighboring kingdoms sharing language, religion, and customs while also quietly suspecting one another. Human politics, in other words, remained comfortingly familiar. Alliances formed. Rivalries simmered. Marriages sealed agreements. Trade enriched everyone. Until someone decided they preferred having everything instead. Because of course they did. Yet these kingdoms were surprisingly sophisticated. The palace was not simply a royal residence. It functioned as the economic heart of the kingdom. Farmers delivered grain. Shepherds reported livestock numbers. Metalworkers received bronze. Textile workers produced cloth. Oil presses processed olives. Wine flowed into enormous storage jars. Everything recorded. Everything counted. Everything supervised. Modern governments collect taxes. The Mycenaean palace collected nearly everything else. The scribes became indispensable. Unlike poets, they wrote for practical reasons. No soaring epics. No romantic adventures. Instead, clay tablets carefully noted sheep, goats, wheat, bronze allocations, military equipment, perfume production, religious offerings, and labor assignments. Accounting. Thousands upon thousands of tiny administrative records. Not exactly bedtime poetry. Although, admittedly, if someone begins reading livestock inventories aloud slowly enough, you might drift off rather quickly. Ironically, these humble accounting records became one of history's greatest treasures. Because they preserve the earliest known form of Greek ever written. The script is called Linear B. For centuries nobody could read it. Then, in 1952, a young architect named Michael Ventris accomplished what many experts believed impossible. He deciphered Linear B. The mysterious symbols turned out not to record some unknown civilization. They recorded Greek. Ancient. Primitive. Different from classical Greek. But unmistakably Greek. Suddenly the silent palace archives began speaking again after more than 3,000 years. Not with heroic speeches. Not with philosophical wisdom. But with receipts. History, it seems, survives in wonderfully ordinary ways. The greatest discoveries sometimes begin with someone's expense reports. And those humble clay tablets would reveal a civilization far richer, more organized, and more interconnected than anyone had imagined. One that inspired legends. One that fought wars across the Aegean. One that looked west toward Italy and east toward Anatolia. One that flourished for centuries before disappearing with astonishing speed. As the evening settles over Bronze Age Greece, torches begin flickering atop the walls of Mycenae. The palace kitchen's quiet. The day's accounting is complete. Bronze armor hangs waiting for tomorrow. Somewhere beyond the mountains, wolves begin to howl. Beyond the sea, merchant ships rock gently at anchor. And somewhere in the distance, events are already unfolding that will one day become the stories of Helen, Achilles, Odysseus, and Troy. But those legends have not yet been written. For now, they are simply tomorrow. The rise of the palace kingdoms. The morning arrives slowly over the Argolid. Mist hangs low in the valleys, turning olive groves into soft gray silhouettes. Dew gathers on barley stalks, while somewhere beyond the hills a shepherd whistles to his dogs. The sound echoes across limestone ridges before disappearing into the waking countryside. The palace above has already begun its day. Long before the farmers finish breakfast, the administrators are awake. The scribes smooth damp clay into neat little tablets. Bronze scales are carefully balanced. Messengers tighten the straps on their sandals before beginning another long journey over rocky mountain paths. A kingdom, after all, cannot simply rule itself. Someone must count the sheep. Someone must know exactly how much olive oil remains in storage. Someone must decide whether enough bronze exists to make 10 spearheads, or 12. Civilizations often appear glorious from a distance. From close up, they look suspiciously like paperwork. And the Mycenaeans loved paperwork. Not because they particularly enjoyed administration, but because their entire world depended upon organization. Unlike later Greek city-states, these were palace economies. Nearly everything important flowed toward the palace first. Imagine enormous storerooms lined with gigantic clay jars, pit hoi, some taller than an average person. Their rounded shoulders disappear into dim light inside cool storage chambers. One jar contains olive oil. Another holds fragrant wine. Another stores barley. Others preserve honey, dried figs, herbs, and precious scented oils destined for foreign kings. Walking through these storerooms would have been like wandering inside the pantry of an empire. The smell alone must have been remarkable. Olive oil. Fresh grain. Beeswax. Wine slowly fermenting. Smoke drifting in from nearby kitchens. Wet clay. Animal hides. Bronze fresh from the forge. It was a world rich with texture. History books often reduce civilizations to dates and battles. But nobody living in Mycenaean Greece experienced history that way. They experienced smells. Cold mornings. Sore backs. Warm bread. The nervous excitement of hearing that a caravan had arrived from Crete. The quiet dread when rumors spread that raiders had been spotted along the coast. For ordinary people, history is almost always personal. The grand political movements come later. First comes wondering whether your roof will survive the winter rain. Outside the palace walls, villages stretched across the valleys. Most families lived in modest homes built from mud bricks set upon stone foundations. Roofs were made from timber and reeds, materials that rarely survived thousands of years. Inside, life was simple. A central hearth provided warmth. Clay pots rested against the walls. Wooden furniture, now long vanished, held baskets of grain and woven cloth. Children slept together beneath wool blankets. Goats occasionally wandered where goats absolutely should not wander. Not much has changed in that department. The average farmer worked from sunrise until nearly sunset. Barley, wheat, olives, grapes, lentils, peas. On poorer soils, sheep and goats proved more dependable than crops. The Mediterranean climate was generous, but never predictable. One dry season could undo months of labor. One unexpected frost could threaten an entire community. Weather possessed enormous authority long before governments learned the trick. Every successful harvest felt like divine approval. Every failed one demanded an explanation. Naturally, the gods received most of the credit. Or the blame. Religion filled every corner of Mycenaean life. This was not yet the polished mythology many people imagine. Zeus certainly existed. So did Hera. Poseidon appears frequently in the palace records, perhaps even more prominently than Zeus in some regions. Athena was known. Hermes appears. Dionysus may already have been worshipped. Many familiar names emerge from the Linear B tablets, almost as if we are meeting younger versions of the Olympian gods before their greatest stories had been invented. But their worship felt different. More practical. More immediate. Priests and priestesses supervised offerings. Animals were sacrificed. Wine poured upon altars. Perfumed oil burned slowly. The smoke drifted skyward carrying prayers no one expected to be answered immediately. Religion was woven into administration itself. The palace organized festivals. The palace distributed offerings. The palace recorded gifts to temples. Kings ruled partly because the gods allowed them to. Or at least everyone agreed that was the safest explanation. High above the valleys stood sacred places where the wind never truly stopped. Perhaps a small shrine. Perhaps only an ancient tree. Perhaps a rocky peak where generations had climbed carrying baskets of grain and young lambs. Standing there at sunset, watching the Aegean shimmer beneath distant clouds, one can almost understand why the divine felt so close. The landscape itself encouraged belief. Mountains rise suddenly from the earth. Thunder echoes for miles. Earthquakes arrive without warning. The sea changes moods in minutes. Invisible forces shape daily existence. Calling them gods seems almost inevitable. Yet while farmers prayed for rain, another group worked tirelessly within the palace workshops. The craftsmen. Bronze defined their civilization. The age itself bears its name. Making bronze sounds deceptively simple. Take copper. Add tin. Heat everything together. Pour into molds. The reality, of course, required extraordinary skill. Copper alone was relatively soft. Tin alone offered little value. Together they became something remarkable. Strong enough for swords. Flexible enough for armor. Reliable enough for tools. The difficulty was obtaining tin. Copper existed in many regions. Tin was astonishingly scarce. And because bronze depended upon both metals, Mycenaean Greece depended upon international trade. This meant a farmer harvesting olives near Mycenae unknowingly relied upon miners hundreds or even thousands of miles away. Globalization, Bronze Age edition. Far slower. Far riskier. But surprisingly recognizable. Merchant ships crossed the Mediterranean carrying cargoes whose value would make modern customs officials very nervous. Copper ingots shaped like ox hides stacked neatly in their hulls. Tin carefully protected. Glass beads. Ivory tusks. Amber from northern Europe. Canaanite pottery. Egyptian scarabs. Exotic perfumes. Fine textiles. Luxury items for ambitious kings determined to impress neighboring rulers. Imagine one of those ships leaving Cyprus. Its sail catches the eastern wind. Crewmen adjust thick ropes woven from flax. The hull creaks rhythmically against gentle waves. Bronze ingots fill the cargo hold. The captain studies the coastline carefully. Open sea remains dangerous. Navigation depends upon stars, landmarks, and experience passed from older sailors to younger ones. Storms appear suddenly. Pirates appear even more suddenly. Every voyage becomes an act of calculated courage. Weeks later, after countless small harbors and cautious anchorages, the vessel finally reaches mainland Greece. Messengers hurry toward the palace. The bronze has arrived. Work can continue. The kingdom breathes again. Without realizing it, the sailors have helped maintain an entire civilization. Bronze shaped nearly every aspect of elite life. Weapons, tools, armor, decorative vessels, ceremonial gifts. Yet despite its importance, relatively few people actually own bronze weapons. A bronze sword represented tremendous wealth. A complete suit of bronze armor bordered upon astonishing extravagance. Most warriors probably fought with simpler equipment. Spears, wooden shields, leather protection. Perhaps a bronze dagger if fortune smiled upon them. The image of every soldier glittering head to toe in polished metal belongs more comfortably in epic poetry than ordinary reality. Even so, warfare occupied an important place within Mycenaean society. The palace maintained inventories of weapons. The tablets mention chariots, wheel parts, horse equipment, arrowheads, helmets. Everything carefully recorded. The famous boar's tusk helmet deserves special mention. Imagine dozens of polished white tusks cut into curved plates and sewn carefully onto a leather cap. The result appears almost strange to modern eyes. Beautiful, practical, slightly intimidating, and surprisingly effective. Homer would later describe exactly this kind of helmet in the Iliad. For centuries scholars assumed he had invented the detail. Then archaeologists discovered actual examples. Sometimes poetry remembers more history than anyone expects. The warriors themselves belonged to an elite class. Young noblemen trained from childhood. They hunted, practiced with spear and sword, learned horseback riding, mastered the art of commanding smaller groups of men. Status required performance. A noble unable to fight inspired little confidence. Power in the Bronze Age remained intensely personal. There were no professional standing armies in the modern sense. The king called. His nobles answered. Their retainers followed. Villagers supplied provisions. Blacksmiths repaired weapons. The entire kingdom mobilized together. One suspects everyone secretly hoped the diplomats solved problems first. Diplomacy was considerably less expensive than replacing dead farmers. Yet conflict remained common. The palace kingdoms competed. Borders shifted. Raids occurred. Livestock disappeared. Retaliation followed. Bronze Age politics often resembled an extended neighborhood argument, except everyone possessed spears. As afternoon sunlight washes over the walls of Mycenae, the palace bustles with confidence. Its storerooms are full. Its workshops ring with the steady rhythm of hammers striking bronze. Its scribes continue recording every sheep, every jar of oil, every allocation of grain. The kingdom appears permanent, unshakable. The walls certainly suggest that impression. But history has a peculiar habit of reminding civilizations that permanence is usually temporary. Beyond the horizon, powerful kingdoms are rising. Egypt flourishes under mighty pharaohs. The Hittite Empire dominates Anatolia. Merchant fleets grow larger. Diplomatic networks become increasingly complex. The entire Eastern Mediterranean is knitting itself together into one interconnected world. It is an age of astonishing prosperity. An age where kings exchange letters across continents. Where luxury goods travel thousands of miles. Where alliances span seas. Where everyone depends upon everyone else, even if they don't quite realize it. Like an elaborate bronze sword balanced carefully upon its edge, the system appears magnificent, stable, brilliant, and perhaps just a little more fragile than anyone can yet imagine. For now, however, the palace sleeps peacefully beneath the evening stars. The scribes place their clay tablets on wooden shelves. The fires in the workshops begin to fade. A cool breeze drifts through the Lion Gate. Above the citadel, countless stars emerge, exactly the same stars that guided merchants across the Aegean and inspired poets long before Homer ever sang of wandering heroes. Tomorrow, we will follow those stars ourselves. Because the sea, not the mountains, made the Mycenaeans rich. And beyond those glittering waters waits Crete, Egypt, Anatolia, and a city called Troy, whose story would echo through the next 3,000 years. Masters of the sea, the Mediterranean that built the Mycenaean world. Before the sun has fully climbed above the eastern horizon, the harbor is already awake. The sea is quiet for the moment. Not silent, because the sea never truly grants silence, but peaceful enough that the waves lap gently against wooden hulls with the steady rhythm of breathing. A gull circles overhead, crying into the cool morning air. Fishermen untangle nets still damp from yesterday's catch. A boy carries amphorae toward a waiting ship, carefully balancing their weight, while trying to look considerably older than he actually is. Somewhere nearby, a carpenter taps a wooden peg into place with slow, practiced strikes that echo across the water. Tar fills the air. Salt clings to every surface. Fresh cut cedar mixes with the scent of drying fish and smoke from cooking fires. It is not the perfume of a palace. It is the smell of a civilization connected by water. If the mountains divided Greece, the sea united it. Modern maps make the Mediterranean appear enormous. To Bronze Age sailors, however, it was something else entirely. A road. A dangerous road, certainly. One lined with storms, hidden reefs, uncertain winds, and the occasional pirate whose business model involved helping himself to whatever someone else had spent months acquiring. But still, a road. From the deck of a Mycenaean ship, the world felt surprisingly close. An island appeared on the horizon. Beyond it, another. Then another. Each stretch of open water revealed the promise of new harbors, unfamiliar languages, valuable cargoes, and occasionally people who viewed strangers with a level of enthusiasm best described as conditional. Every voyage carried opportunity. Every voyage carried risk. The two were inseparable. Imagine stepping aboard one of these vessels. The ship is long and narrow, built from carefully fitted wooden planks stitched and pegged together with remarkable skill. The mast rises from the center like the trunk of a young pine. A square sail hangs folded while rowers prepare their benches. There are no cabins. No private quarters. No comfortable mattresses waiting below deck. Luxury, at sea, remains a very flexible concept. The captain studies the coastline. He does not possess a compass. He has never heard of longitude. The stars are his map. The wind is his advisor. Memory is his greatest navigational tool. He knows which headlands hide dangerous rocks. He knows which bays offer fresh water. He knows which villages welcome merchants. And which villages welcome merchants only after stealing their cargo. Experience is worth more than any bronze weapon. A sailor who survives 30 years at sea has already accomplished something extraordinary. As the sail catches the morning breeze, the shoreline slowly begins to drift away. Ahead lies the open Aegean. The water glitters beneath the rising sun, broken only by distant islands emerging like sleeping giants from the mist. It is difficult not to feel small out here. The sea possesses a curious talent for reminding human beings of their actual size. Even kings become passengers. The Mycenaeans understood this better than most. Although they built mighty citadels on land, their prosperity depended upon ships. Without maritime trade, their bronze workshops would grow silent. Their luxury goods would disappear. Their alliances would weaken. Their influence would shrink dramatically. A palace without merchants quickly became a palace with very uncomfortable questions about missing resources. Bronze required copper. Copper required ships. Ships required timber. Timber required forests. Forests required careful management, or, more often than not, enthusiastic cutting followed by someone else's problem. Civilizations rarely think long-term while enjoying short-term success. That habit, too, appears remarkably ancient. The voyage continues southward. Soon the mountains of mainland Greece fade behind the horizon. Ahead lies Crete, the great island. The kingdom that once dominated these waters before the Mycenaeans themselves rose to prominence. Even from a distance, Crete feels different. Its mountains rise sharply from the sea, their peaks often wrapped in clouds while vineyards and olive groves spread across fertile plains below. Villages cling to hillsides. Harbors bustle with activity. The island seems to breathe confidence. Long before Mycenaean kings filled their own storerooms, Minoan merchants had already mastered the rhythms of Mediterranean commerce. Their ships traveled farther. Their artists painted brighter frescoes. Their palaces spread across vast complexes unlike anything else in Europe. Knossos stood at the heart of this remarkable civilization. Approaching it for the first time must have felt astonishing. The palace did not resemble a fortress. There were no massive defensive walls like those surrounding Mycenae or Tiryns. Instead, elegant staircases climbed through airy courtyards. Columns painted deep red supported upper floors. Walls exploded with color. Blue dolphins swam across plaster. Graceful women wearing elaborate dresses participated in ceremonies. Young athletes vaulted over charging bulls in scenes that still leave modern viewers wondering precisely whose idea that sport had been. Because watching a charging bull and thinking, "I should jump over that," requires either extraordinary courage or a complete misunderstanding of personal safety. Perhaps both. The Minoans celebrated movement. Their art seems alive. Unlike the stern military imagery favored by later Mycenaean elites, Minoan frescoes celebrate festivals, nature, dance, flowers, sea creatures, and graceful human figures. They depict a civilization remarkably comfortable with beauty. The Mycenaeans admired much of this. They copied Minoan pottery styles. They adopted artistic techniques. They borrowed administrative ideas. Eventually, they inherited far more than that. Around the 15th century BC, something dramatic occurred. Exactly what happened remains one of archaeology's great debates. Perhaps warfare. Perhaps political takeover. Perhaps a gradual shift in power. Whatever the process, Mycenaean rulers assumed control over Knossos. The palace continued functioning. But the writing changed. Linear A gave way to Linear B. The language recorded on the tablets became Greek. For the first time, mainland rulers controlled the richest island in the Aegean. The balance of power had shifted. The students had inherited the classroom. Trade expanded even further. From Crete, ships sailed toward Egypt. And Egypt almost seemed impossibly wealthy. Imagine arriving at the Nile Delta after weeks at sea. The coastline appears flat and green beyond endless marshes filled with birds. Then the river itself unfolds before you, broad and shimmering beneath an enormous sky. After Greece's rugged mountains, Egypt must have appeared almost magical. Reliable floods nourished fields stretching farther than the eye could see. Monumental temples towered above the landscape. Statues of pharaohs gazed calmly toward eternity. Everything seemed larger, older, more organized. Even the bureaucracy possessed a certain majestic confidence. The Egyptians had been keeping records for well over 1,000 years before the Mycenaean kingdoms reached their height. Experience counts. The Mycenaeans did not conquer Egypt. Nor did Egypt conquer them. Instead, they traded. Gifts passed between rulers. Exotic animals changed hands. Gold flowed north. Olive oil traveled south. Luxury goods crossed cultural boundaries with surprising ease. Diplomats learned enough foreign customs to avoid accidentally insulting someone important. Usually, one imagines at least a few awkward misunderstandings. Human diplomacy has always involved smiling politely while hoping everyone interprets the gestures correctly. Somewhere inside an Egyptian palace, a Mycenaean envoy might present beautifully crafted bronze weapons. Meanwhile, Egyptian officials display carved ivory, linen finer than anything found in Greece, and jewelry shimmering with gold from Nubia. Neither side fully understands the other's language. Yet both understand wealth immediately. Luxury requires remarkably little translation. From Egypt, the sea routes continue eastward toward the cities of the Levant. Ports crowded with merchants speaking dozens of languages. Markets overflowing with cedar wood, purple dyes, glass vessels, spices, and finely woven textiles. Here, the Mediterranean truly reveals itself as one connected world. Not peaceful. Certainly not equal. But connected. Ideas traveled alongside cargo. Religious symbols crossed borders. Artistic styles migrated from workshop to workshop. Stories themselves drifted between cultures. Perhaps somewhere in these bustling harbors, sailors exchanged tales over cups of wine. A monster seen near Cyprus. A storm survived off Crete. A clever captain who escaped disaster through wit rather than strength. Generations later, those stories grow. Names change. Details become grander. Gods become involved. Before long, legends are sailing just as confidently as merchant ships. History and mythology begin quietly sharing the same cabin. To the north lies Anatolia, modern-day Turkey. A land of mountains, fertile plains, and powerful kingdoms. Most formidable among them was the Hittite Empire. Unlike the palace kingdoms of Greece, the Hittites ruled a vast territory extending deep into the interior. Their kings exchanged diplomatic letters with Egypt itself. They fought major wars, signed treaties, maintained professional administrations. To the Mycenaeans, they represented another great power across the sea. The Hittite archives mention a people called the Ahiwa. For decades, scholars argued over their identity. Today, many believe Ahiwa referred to the Achaeans, the Mycenaean Greeks remembered in Homer's poems. If so, the Mycenaeans were not merely legendary warriors. They were recognized players in international politics. Real kingdoms. Real diplomacy. Real negotiations. Their world suddenly feels much less mythical. Even Troy appears in Hittite documents. Not under that famous name, but likely as Wilusa. A prosperous city positioned near the entrance to the Dardanelles. A place controlling access between the Aegean and the Black Sea. Strategically invaluable. Anyone wishing to dominate trade through those waters naturally paid close attention to Wilusa. One begins to understand why powerful kingdoms might quarrel over such a city. Perhaps not because of one extraordinarily beautiful queen. Though poetry certainly prefers that explanation. Trade routes rarely inspire epic songs. Love affairs do. Still, economics usually waits patiently behind the curtain. As evening settles over the Mediterranean, our merchant vessel turns homeward. Its cargo now includes Egyptian beads, Levantine glass, Cypriot copper, and perhaps a few stories that will become considerably more dramatic by the time they reach Mycenae. The crew watches the stars emerge one by one. Orion climbs above the eastern horizon. The familiar constellations guide the ship through darkness just as they have guided countless generations before. Far away, beyond the sea, the palace fires of Mycenae flicker against the night. Its storerooms will soon receive new treasures. Its scribes will press fresh symbols into soft clay. Its king will greet foreign envoys with calculated generosity. Everything appears prosperous. Everything appears secure. The Bronze Age world has never seemed richer. Which is precisely why almost no one notices how delicately the entire system is balanced. A civilization connected by ships can also be broken by them. And before many generations have passed, those same waters that carried wealth across the Mediterranean will begin carrying something far darker. Rumors, refugees, armies, and the first whispers that the age of great palace kingdoms may not last forever. The Wanax, kings beneath the Lion Gate. Night slowly releases its grip on the citadel. The stars fade one by one above the rugged hills of the Peloponnese. A pale ribbon of light stretches across the eastern horizon, painting the limestone walls of Mycenae in shades of silver and gold. Somewhere inside the palace, a rooster announces the dawn with far more confidence than accuracy. Bakers are already awake, kneading dough beside glowing hearths. Stable boys carry buckets of water toward restless horses. A guard yawns discreetly behind his enormous shield, hoping nobody important notices. The kingdom is waking. And somewhere near the center of it all, the king is waking too. Although, king is only the closest modern word. The people who served him knew him by another title. Wanax. It is an ancient word. Older than classical Greek. Older than the Parthenon. Older than nearly everything people usually associate with ancient Greece. When the scribes pressed tiny signs into wet clay, they used this title repeatedly. Not casually. Not poetically. Administratively. The Wanax received offerings. The Wanax owned estates. The Wanax commanded craftsmen. The Wanax supervised religious ceremonies. His authority touched almost every corner of palace life. Yet unlike later emperors, he probably ruled a kingdom that could be crossed in only a few days' walk. Power, in the Bronze Age, was measured less by the size of maps than by the strength of relationships. Everyone important knew everyone else. Or at least knew someone who claimed they did. Imagine following a narrow stone passage into the palace itself. Outside, the cyclopean walls look intimidating enough to discourage almost anyone from asking uncomfortable political questions. Inside, however, the atmosphere changes. Sunlight pours into open courtyards. Wooden columns painted brilliant red support upper stories. The smell of fresh plaster mixes with cedar beams warmed by the morning sun. Servants move quietly across polished floors carrying baskets of fruit, folded textiles, and clay vessels filled with fragrant oil. Nothing here feels accidental. Every doorway, every staircase, every storage room, everything has been carefully planned. Because the palace is more than a home. It is the beating heart of the kingdom. At its center lies the Megaron, the Great Hall. If Mycenae possessed a soul, this was where it lived. Step inside. The room is surprisingly warm. A circular hearth burns steadily in the middle, its smoke rising through an opening high above in the roof. Four sturdy wooden columns surround the fire, supporting the ceiling while sunlight filters gently downward in pale shafts. The walls are painted. Not plain stone, but colorful frescoes. Geometric patterns. Scenes of hunting. Processions. Perhaps warriors carrying shields. Perhaps women participating in ceremonies. Everything reminding visitors that they stand inside the residence of someone extraordinary. At the far end of the hall sits the throne. Simple by modern royal standards. Magnificent by Bronze Age ones. Here the Wanax receives ambassadors. Settles disputes. Rewards loyal followers. Plans military campaigns. Listens to reports from distant provinces. And occasionally, one imagines, wishes everyone would stop bringing him problems before breakfast. Leadership has never been especially relaxing. Around him gather members of the royal household. Not merely family. An entire network of officials. There are administrators responsible for livestock. Others supervise bronze production. Some oversee textiles. Others monitor agricultural harvests. Each arrives carrying information collected from every corner of the kingdom. One shepherd reports missing sheep. A merchant announces the arrival of Cypriot copper. A messenger describes unusual activity near the coast. Another delivers gifts from a neighboring ruler. The Wanax hears it all, or at least pretends to. Kings throughout history have perfected the art of appearing deeply thoughtful while quietly wondering how many more meetings remain before lunch. Outside the Megaron, scribes work with astonishing concentration. Unlike Egyptian scribes writing elegant hieroglyphs upon papyrus, Mycenaean administrators used small lumps of clay. They flatten each tablet carefully. Then, using a sharpened stylus, they press tiny linear B symbols into the damp surface. Every mark matters. A single missing sign could transform 10 sheep into 100. Someone would certainly notice. Accounting errors become surprisingly memorable when livestock is involved. The remarkable thing is that these tablets were never intended to survive. They were temporary records. Once the information became outdated, the clay could simply be recycled. Efficient. Practical. Environmentally friendly, one might almost say. Yet fate possessed other plans. When the palace eventually burned centuries later, intense heat accidentally baked the tablets hard, preserving them forever. The kingdom was destroyed. But its paperwork became immortal. History sometimes displays a peculiar sense of humor. The accountants won. Thousands of years later, archaeologists would reconstruct entire administrative systems from documents never meant to last beyond a single year. The palace archives reveal astonishing detail. Lists of shepherds. Inventories of horses. Measurements of grain. Allocations of bronze. Names of women weaving textiles. Children employed in workshops. Religious offerings. Military equipment. The records rarely describe dramatic battles or heroic speeches. Instead, they reveal ordinary life. And ordinary life is often where history hides most faithfully. The Wanax himself rarely acted alone. Beneath him served another powerful official known as the Lawagitas. The title probably means something like leader of the people. Exactly what his responsibilities involved remains uncertain. Perhaps commander of armies. Perhaps chief noble. Perhaps both. Bronze Age job descriptions, unfortunately, were less detailed than modern employment contracts. Still, the existence of such officials reminds us that Mycenaean government was already becoming sophisticated. Power required delegation. No king, however ambitious, could personally supervise every olive grove, every bronze workshop, every flock of sheep, and every merchant vessel arriving from overseas. Even legendary rulers eventually run out of hours in the day. Further down the hierarchy came local governors, village leaders, military officers, religious officials, craft supervisors. Each played a role within the palace system. The kingdom resembled an enormous web. Every thread connected. Pull one strand. The entire structure trembled. This efficiency brought tremendous prosperity. It also created tremendous vulnerability. But that realization belongs to another chapter. For now, everything functions beautifully. Walk through the palace workshops. The sound arrives first. Hammer against bronze. Hammer against bronze. Again. Again. Steady. Rhythmic. Almost musical. Bronzesmiths stand beside blazing furnaces where charcoal burns white hot. Molten metal glows orange before pouring into carefully carved stone molds. A sword begins as liquid fire. Slowly it cools. Its edges are hammered. Polished. Sharpened until sunlight dances along its length. Nearby another craftsman shapes delicate gold into cups so thin they almost seem impossible. Others carve ivory imported from distant lands. Some create elaborate jewelry destined for noblewomen. Others produce practical tools for farmers. The palace controls everything. Raw materials arrive. Finished products leave. Nothing significant escapes administrative notice. Across another courtyard sits the textile workshop. If bronze built the kingdom's military strength, textiles built much of its economy. Hundreds of women spin wool into thread. Others weave intricate fabrics upon tall looms. The rhythmic clacking fills the room. Thread crosses thread. Hours become days. Days become months. One magnificent cloak slowly emerges. The palace tablets mention these workers frequently. Many were probably dependent laborers attached to the palace. Some may have been captives from foreign lands. Others inherited their occupations from previous generations. Life inside the palace economy offered security, but rarely freedom. The kingdom expected productivity. Individual dreams seldom appear within administrative records. History remembers institutions more easily than emotions. Step outside again into the sunlight. The palace overlooks fertile valleys stretching toward distant mountains. Fields shimmer beneath warm breezes. Farmers guide oxen through freshly turned soil. Children chase goats with limited success. Women gather olives beneath ancient trees. Smoke rises lazily from village hearths. The landscape appears peaceful. Yet peace itself requires maintenance. Messengers arrive daily from neighboring kingdoms. Some bring gifts. Others carry carefully worded letters. A few arrive with news nobody wishes to hear. Bandits have attacked travelers. A border dispute has erupted. Merchants complain about missing cargo. Someone's cattle have wandered precisely where they should not. Civilization often advances one administrative complaint at a time. Diplomacy becomes essential. Marriage becomes politics. A princess from one kingdom marries the ruler of another. Gold changes hands. Feasts celebrate friendship. Everyone smiles. Everyone promises lasting peace. Everyone quietly prepares for the possibility that peace may not last very long. Because this remains the Bronze Age. Bronze swords are expensive. Nobody invests that much effort into making weapons solely for decorative purposes. The Wanax understands this. His generals understand this. Even ordinary farmers understand this. Beyond the cultivated valleys lie forests where hunters pursue wild boar. Beyond those forests stand mountains separating neighboring kingdoms. Beyond those mountains, another ambitious ruler may already be strengthening his own palace walls. Competition never truly sleeps. As afternoon fades into evening, musicians gather within the Megaron. A lyre begins to play. Soft notes drift upward towards smoke-darkened rafters. Wine is poured into finely crafted cups. Roasted lamb fills the hall with rich aromas. Nobles recline upon wooden benches while servants circulate quietly among them. Stories begin. Not written. Spoken. A hunter recalls a dangerous boar. A sailor describes impossible waves near Crete. An old warrior exaggerates his victories by approximately 50%. Perhaps more. No one interrupts. Every generation adds another layer to the tales. One day. Centuries later. Poets will gather fragments like these. Names will become legends. Battles will become epics. Ordinary kings will transform into heroes touched by the gods. Agamemnon, Nestor, Menelaus, Odysseus. Some of them may already be remembered in whispers. Others have yet to be born. But the world that will shape their stories is already here. Its walls are real. Its kings are real. Its ambitions are painfully real. As darkness settles across Mycenae, Torches flicker along the Lion Gate. The palace gradually grows quiet. The scribes place their styluses aside. The bronze forge is cool. Guards take their positions upon the towering walls. Above them, the stars return once more. Exactly as they did yesterday. Exactly as they will tomorrow. The Wanex retires, believing, as nearly every ruler throughout history has believed, that his kingdom is strong enough to endure. He cannot yet imagine that, within only a few generations, these magnificent halls will stand abandoned. The fires that warm the Megaron today will one day consume it. And when they do, they will accidentally preserve the voices of an entire civilization beneath layers of ash, waiting patiently for another 3,000 years before speaking again. Life inside the lion walls, ordinary people in an extraordinary age. The stories that survive from the Bronze Age usually belong to kings. Their names are carved into memory. Their treasures fill museum cases. Their palaces crown lonely hills. But if you were to stand outside the Lion Gate on an ordinary spring morning, you would quickly notice something rather important. Almost nobody entering those gates is a king. History, as always, is carried on the shoulders of ordinary people. The woman balancing a basket of grain upon her head. The potter whose hands are permanently stained with clay. The shepherd who has spent 3 sleepless nights searching for missing goats. The blacksmith whose arms have grown thick from years of striking glowing bronze. The little girl chasing chickens through the dust while her grandmother sighs with the weary acceptance of someone who has already lost that particular argument. They are the ones who truly keep Mycenae alive. The palace may command. The people make that command possible. Imagine walking away from the palace for a while. Leave behind the painted halls and administrative offices. Follow a narrow path winding downhill between stone houses. The streets are uneven beneath your sandals. Rain has carved shallow channels into the earth over many winters. Dogs wander freely. Children run barefoot without the slightest concern for future archaeologists attempting to reconstruct urban planning. Smoke rises from dozens of hearths. Breakfast is already underway. Inside one modest home, a woman kneels beside a grinding stone. Hour after hour, she pushes the upper stone back and forth, reducing barley into coarse flour. The movement is repetitive, relentless. Her shoulders ache. Her hands have become callous years ago. No one applauds this work. Yet without it, nobody eats. It is one of history's quieter forms of heroism. Nearby, dough is mixed with water and a little salt before being shaped into flat loaves. They bake against the hot walls of a clay oven until the smell of fresh bread drifts into the street. It is not luxurious, but it is warm, reliable, comforting. Some things never change. Breakfast might include olives gathered the previous autumn, goat cheese, figs dried beneath the summer sun, perhaps a little honey if the household is fortunate. Wine, usually diluted with water, accompanies many meals. Drinking wine straight would have seemed rather uncivilized. Or perhaps simply an efficient method of becoming embarrassingly loud before noon. Water itself could vary greatly in quality. Wine was safer. Besides, vineyards represented wealth. Olive groves represented stability. Both became symbols of civilization itself. Outside the village, farmers are already working. The Mediterranean sun has not yet become oppressive, and everyone understands that the coolest hours are the most valuable. Oxen pull wooden plows through stubborn soil. Seeds scatter behind them. Birds follow eagerly, convinced that human agriculture exists primarily for their convenience. A farmer waves them away. The birds return immediately. Some conflicts truly are timeless. The land demands constant attention. Olive trees require pruning. Vines must be trained carefully. Stone terraces need repair after winter rains. Goats, displaying their usual commitment to chaos, nibble leaves wherever they can reach. Every season brings new tasks. Spring means planting. Summer means waiting. Autumn means harvest. Winter means repairing everything that broke during the rest of the year. The rhythm repeats endlessly. For most people, this cycle defines life far more completely than any distant political event. Whether two kings sign an alliance matters. Whether your barley survives a drought matters considerably more. Children grow up quickly here. By the age of 7 or 8, many already contribute meaningful work. Girls help spin wool, fetch water, care for younger siblings, learn recipes passed down through generations. Boys accompany fathers into fields or hillsides. They learn to tend animals, repair fences, recognize changing weather simply by studying the clouds above the mountains. Education exists, just not in classrooms. Knowledge passes from hands to hands, eyes to eyes, generation to generation. Mistakes can be expensive. An inexperienced shepherd who loses half the flock is unlikely to receive an encouraging performance review. He will receive something far less pleasant. As afternoon approaches, the marketplace grows busier. Do not imagine a permanent square lined with stone shops. Think instead of an open space where traders gather beneath temporary shelters. Pottery stands beside woven baskets. Fresh fish glisten upon beds of damp reeds. A merchant displays bronze knives polished until they catch the sunlight. Another offers beads made from amber that traveled farther than almost anyone standing here ever will. Languages mingle together. Most conversations occur in Greek. Others drift in from Crete. Some arrive from Cyprus. A few merchants speak languages nobody else understands. Trade creates its own universal vocabulary. Point. Smile. Negotiate. Pretend your price is final. Accept a slightly lower offer after theatrical reluctance. Human commerce perfected this dance long before anyone invented coins. Money itself does not yet exist. At least not as metal currency. Payments take many forms. Oil, grain, livestock, bronze, labor, luxury goods. The palace carefully tracks much of this exchange. Ordinary people simply hope everyone remembers who still owes whom 3 goats from last year's agreement. Memory serves as an excellent accounting system. Until it doesn't. Somewhere beyond the marketplace stands the village potter. His workshop is warm even before the kiln is lit. Shelves display vessels drying in neat rows. Large storage jars. Delicate drinking cups. Cooking pots blackened by countless fires. Clay waits patiently beside the wheel. The potter moistens his hands. The wheel begins turning. Almost magically, a shapeless lump rises beneath skilled fingers. A jar emerges. Graceful. Balanced. Useful. Every household depends upon pottery. Unlike wooden bowls, clay survives. Unlike woven baskets, it resists insects. Unlike metal vessels, it remains affordable. Archaeologists adore pottery. Ancient families probably thought of it much as we think of kitchen containers today. Necessary. Ordinary. Entirely unremarkable. History often survives inside objects nobody considered worth remembering. The same is true of clothing. Most people wear garments made from wool or linen. Simple tunics. Belts tied at the waist. Leather sandals when available. Bare feet when practicality outweighs comfort. Brightly dyed fabrics belong mainly to the wealthy. Purple, especially, remains astonishingly expensive. The sea snail responsible for producing that magnificent color has absolutely no idea it is participating in international luxury markets. Life is strange. Noblewomen wear finely woven dresses decorated with embroidery and jewelry. Gold earrings catch the sunlight. Necklaces display imported beads. Hair is carefully arranged. Appearance communicates status. It always has. A visitor should recognize wealth before anyone says a word. The same principle quietly governs architecture, weapons, feasts, and funerals. Humans have never been especially subtle about success. As evening approaches, shepherds return from the hills. Hundreds of sheep move together like slow-moving clouds across the landscape. Dust rises beneath countless hooves. Dogs circle constantly, keeping the flock together with astonishing intelligence. One old shepherd counts carefully. Again. And again. The palace expects accurate numbers. Missing sheep raise uncomfortable questions. Predators explain some losses. Thieves explain others. Neither explanation improves tomorrow's accounting. Back inside the village, cooking fires multiply. The smell of roasting onions drifts through narrow streets. Stew bubbles gently inside clay pots. Children laugh. Someone begins playing a simple melody upon a reed pipe. Nearby, an elderly woman tells stories to a small audience gathered around the hearth. There are heroes in her tales. Monsters too. Great storms sent by angry gods. Clever travelers escaping impossible dangers. The children listen with wide eyes. None of these stories have been written. None need to be. Memory is enough. For now. Perhaps one little boy listening tonight will someday tell these same stories to his own grandchildren. Perhaps each telling will grow slightly grander. A hero defeats 3 enemies instead of 2. A storm lasts 9 days instead of 5. A giant becomes even larger. A voyage becomes even longer. This is how oral tradition breathes. Not through perfect accuracy, but through constant life. Centuries later, when Homer sings of Odysseus wandering across impossible seas, echoes of evenings like this may still linger beneath every verse. The stories belong to the people before they belong to the poets. Night settles gently over the valley. The palace glows softly atop its hill. Its torches visible for miles. Families gather around hearths. Doors are barred. Animals are secured. Outside the walls, wolves begin calling across the mountains. Inside, babies sleep beside warm fires. Parents whisper quietly about tomorrow's work. Somewhere above them, the Wanex rests beneath painted ceilings. Somewhere below, farmers sleep upon simple mats. The distance between their lives is enormous. Yet both depend upon the same harvest. The same weather. The same fragile peace. Neither knows that history is already moving toward them with slow, almost invisible determination. The fields will still produce grain. The markets will still fill with merchants. The palace will continue recording every sheep and every jar of oil. For a while. Because no civilization, however prosperous, notices the beginning of its ending. The first cracks rarely announce themselves with trumpets. They begin quietly. A delayed shipment. A failed harvest. An unexpected raid. A missing caravan. Small inconveniences. Barely worth mentioning. Until suddenly, they are everything. And beyond the eastern horizon, where Anatolia meets the sea, events are unfolding that will eventually shake every palace from Mycenae to Pylos. The world behind the Odyssey is about to become far more dangerous than even its greatest storytellers could imagine. Bronze, blood, and honor, the warrior world that inspired Homer. The first sound is not a trumpet. It is a hammer. A slow, deliberate strike against glowing bronze. Then another. And another. Long before a warrior lifts his shield. Long before horses pull a chariot across dusty ground. Long before a king declares that negotiations have officially become everyone's problem. Someone must build the weapons. Morning sunlight spills through the doorway of the bronze workshop inside Mycenae. The forge is already unbearably warm. Charcoal crackles beneath clay furnaces. Bellows breathe steadily, each deep exhale feeding the fire until the metal glows the color of a summer sunset. The blacksmith hardly notices the heat anymore. His arms move with quiet confidence earned through decades of practice. He knows exactly how long bronze should remain in the fire. Too little. The blade will be weak. Too much. The metal may become brittle. Like baking bread, only the bread can accidentally stab someone. The Mycenaeans lived in an age that literally depended upon bronze. Their civilization has been named after the metal itself. Not because bronze was beautiful, although it certainly could be, but because nearly every important object depended upon it. Axes, knives, spears, sickles, armor, chisels, swords. Even religious offerings were often fashioned from carefully polished bronze. Iron existed. People knew about it. Small pieces occasionally appeared, often recovered from meteorites that had fallen from the heavens. Such iron was rare enough to seem almost magical. Bronze remained king. And bronze demanded cooperation across half the Mediterranean. Copper came from Cyprus. Tin arrived from lands so distant that even modern archaeologists continue debating all the possible sources. Without one, the other was nearly useless. A palace could possess mountains of copper. Without tin, its workshops would grow silent. It was a remarkably fragile system. The Mycenaeans simply had no reason to think it would ever stop working. Prosperity has a curious habit of convincing people that tomorrow will resemble today. History politely disagrees. For now, though, the kingdom flourishes. Finished weapons line wooden racks inside the workshop. Some swords are astonishingly long, nearly a meter in length. Earlier examples were slender, elegant, almost graceful. Perfect for slashing attacks. Later swords become shorter and sturdier, better suited for the brutal reality of close combat. Even weapons evolve. Each generation quietly learning from the last. Nearby rests the spear. Simple. Deadly. Reliable. If there is one weapon that truly defined Bronze Age warfare, it was probably not the sword. It was the spear. Cheaper to produce. Longer reach. Easier to replace. A sword often belonged to a noble. A spear could belong to almost anyone expected to fight. History loves famous swords. Battlefields usually belong to spears. Against another wall hangs one of the most remarkable helmets ever created. At first glance, it almost appears decorative. Its surface is covered with dozens of pale ivory-colored plates arranged in neat overlapping rows. Look closer. Those plates are not ivory. They are boar tusks, each carefully cut, polished, sewn onto a leather cap. One helmet required dozens of wild boars. Imagine what that represented. Years of dangerous hunts. Countless hours of careful craftsmanship. A tremendous investment of resources. This was not merely protection. It was prestige. When Homer described Odysseus receiving such a helmet in the Iliad, generations of readers assumed the poet had invented something suitably dramatic. Then archaeologists unearthed actual examples. Once again, legend quietly nodded toward history. Outside the workshop, young warriors gather in an open training ground. Their shields lean against wooden posts. Some practice with spears. Others wrestle beneath the watchful eye of older veterans. A few struggle to control restless horses that seem only marginally interested in military discipline. Dust rises beneath countless feet. Sweat glistens beneath the morning sun. Training is relentless. Strength matters. Skill matters more. Discipline matters most. A nobleman's son begins learning these lessons almost as soon as he can walk. He grows up hearing stories of brave ancestors, victorious hunts, successful raids, loyal companions. Cowardice rarely appears in such family histories. No one gathers children around the fire to celebrate great Uncle Philin, who once hid behind a barrel during an argument. Memory favors courage, or at least convincing stories about courage. Honor becomes the invisible currency of elite society. Not honor in the modern sense. Not abstract morality. Something more immediate, more public, more fragile. A warrior's reputation determines alliances, marriage prospects, political influence, followers. Lose your wealth. Perhaps you recover. Lose your reputation. Recovery becomes considerably more difficult. This obsession with honor would echo loudly through Greek literature for centuries. Achilles does not merely fight for victory. He fights because honor demands it. Agamemnon quarrels over status because status defines authority. Odysseus values cleverness because survival often depends upon it. These ideas did not appear from nowhere. They grew from the soil of Mycenaean society. Imagine one young noble standing quietly at the edge of the training field. Perhaps he is 17. Strong. Confident. Eager to prove himself. His father commands warriors loyal to the palace. His grandfather died defending the kingdom. Everyone expects greatness. That expectation weighs more heavily than bronze armor. He dreams of glory. He has never seen real battle. Like young soldiers in every age, he imagines courage. He cannot yet imagine fear. Late in the morning, the training shifts. Servants lead horses into the field. Behind them come chariots. To modern eyes, chariots often appear as ancient tanks charging dramatically across battlefields. Reality proves somewhat more complicated. Mycenaean chariots were light, fast, beautifully constructed. Their wooden wheels bound with leather, bronze fittings catching the sunlight. Exactly how they were used remains debated. Perhaps as mobile platforms for elite warriors. Perhaps mainly for rapid transportation. Perhaps for ceremonial displays as much as practical warfare. Whatever their exact role, they symbolized prestige. Maintaining horses alone required considerable wealth. Maintaining horses and chariots announced unmistakable status. The palace tablets record them carefully. Wheel parts, axles, harnesses, teams of horses. Everything counted. Everything supervised. Even military glory required administrative paperwork. Somewhere nearby, scribes are probably recording replacement wheels. One imagines history's first logistics officer quietly reminding everyone that heroic charges are difficult without functioning axles. As afternoon approaches, a hunting party leaves the palace. Not because food is desperately needed. Though fresh meat is certainly welcome. The hunt serves another purpose. Training. Prestige. Preparation. Wild boars inhabit the forests surrounding Mycenae. Powerful animals. Fast. Aggressive. A wounded boar can kill an inexperienced hunter with terrifying efficiency. Facing one requires genuine courage. The nobles ride toward the hills carrying spears. Dogs race ahead, noses close to the ground. Leaves rustle beneath warm breezes. Birdsong fills the forest. Everything feels peaceful. Until suddenly, the dogs begin barking. Branches snap violently. The boar erupts from dense undergrowth like an avalanche wrapped in bristles. For a heartbeat nobody moves. Then chaos. Men shout. Spears lower. Dogs scatter. The animal charges with astonishing speed. One hunter leaps aside just in time. Another plants his spear into the earth. The boar strikes. Dust explodes. Wood cracks. Bronze flashes. Then silence. Slowly. Carefully. The hunters approach. The animal lies still. Breathing returns. Nervous laughter follows. Someone immediately begins exaggerating his own bravery. This tradition, too, proves wonderfully ancient. The tusks will become another helmet someday. Another symbol of courage. Another reminder that prestige often begins with dangerous work. As evening settles over Mycenae, preparations begin for a feast. Not every day ends this way, of course. But successful hunts, diplomatic visits, religious festivals, military victories, all deserve celebration. The Megaron fills once more. The central hearth burns brightly. Wine flows generously. Musicians tune their lyres. Roasted lamb fills the air with rich aromas. The Wanax sits upon his throne. His closest companions gather nearby. Warriors recline together, laughing loudly now that danger belongs safely to the past. Servants circulate carrying bread, olives, roasted onions, figs, and fragrant herbs. Conversation drifts easily from hunting to politics, from trade to neighboring kingdoms, from old victories to future ambitions. And then, the storyteller rises. Perhaps he is an aging warrior, perhaps a professional singer, perhaps simply the best storyteller anyone knows. He lifts his lyre. The room grows quiet. He begins not with facts, but with memory shaped into music. A king once crossed the sea. A mighty fortress stood upon distant cliffs. A warrior defeated impossible odds. The gods watched from above. The audience smiles. They know these stories. Yet every telling feels new. The names may differ. The details shift. Heroes become slightly taller. Enemies slightly more terrifying. Journeys slightly longer. Nobody minds. Truth in an oral culture is measured less by precision than by meaning. Somewhere among these songs, very quietly, the foundations of the Iliad and the Odyssey are already being laid. Not written. Remembered. Refined. Passed from voice to voice like glowing embers carried carefully through the night. Outside the palace walls, ordinary villagers finish their evening meals. Children drift toward sleep. Dogs curl beside warm doorways. Shepherds check their flocks one last time beneath a sky overflowing with stars. The constellations shine exactly as they did for countless generations before. Orion. The Pleiades. The Great Bear circling patiently around the northern heavens. The same stars guide sailors, farmers, hunters, kings, and poets not yet born. High above the valley, the Lion Gate stands silent beneath moonlight. Its carved guardians seem eternal, unmoving, invincible. The warriors sleeping behind those walls believe they belong to the greatest age their world has ever known. In many ways, they are right. The palaces have never been richer. Trade has never been broader. Bronze has never flowed more steadily. Songs have never been grander. Yet history has an old habit. It often allows civilizations to reach their brightest moment just before the shadows begin to lengthen. And somewhere beyond the Eastern Sea, powerful kingdoms are beginning to falter. Trade routes are growing uncertain. Great empires are becoming uneasy. No one inside Mycenae yet realizes it. But the Age of Bronze has already begun its long sunset. Across the wine-dark sea, The real Troy and the world of kings. Somewhere before dawn, while the palace of Mycenae still sleeps beneath its heavy stone walls, another city is already stirring. It stands hundreds of miles away. Not in Greece. Not on Crete. But on a wind-swept hill overlooking one of the most valuable stretches of water in the ancient world. The people who live there do not call it Troy. Not exactly. To the Hittites, it is probably Wilissa. To later generations, it will become Ilios. And eventually, the city will be remembered simply as Troy. Its name will outlive empires. But this morning, nobody living inside its walls suspects that poets thousands of years in the future will still be arguing about them. Life, after all, feels wonderfully ordinary. Smoke rises from ovens. Merchants unlock storerooms. Children complain about chores with timeless dedication. Dogs bark at absolutely nothing visible. Civilization begins another day. If you climb to the highest point of the city, the view explains almost everything. To the west lies the Aegean Sea. To the northeast stretches the narrow waterway we now call the Dardanelles. Every ship sailing between the Black Sea and the Mediterranean must pass nearby. Grain, copper, timber, amber, furs, wine, oil. Everything moving north or south comes astonishingly close to these walls. It is an enviable position. It is also an inconvenient invitation for powerful neighbors to become interested. Geography often writes history long before human beings arrive. The city itself is prosperous. Not enormous by modern standards. Perhaps home to several thousand people during its greatest years. Stone fortifications surround the citadel. Strong towers overlook carefully built gateways. Outside the walls spreads a lower town filled with workshops, homes, animals, and narrow streets. Archaeologists have spent generations uncovering these layers. Each city built upon the ruins of the last. One Troy. Then another. And another. Like a stack of forgotten memories. For centuries, many scholars doubted Troy had existed at all. The Iliad was poetry, they argued. Beautiful poetry. But surely not history. Then, in the 19th century, excavations began. Some of those excavations were energetic. Heinrich Schliemann deserves enormous credit for believing Homer contained real geography. He also deserves gentle criticism for occasionally excavating with all the subtlety of someone searching for lost house keys using explosives. Archaeology has improved considerably since then. Thankfully. Modern excavations reveal something remarkable. There really was an important Bronze Age city here. It really was wealthy. It really did possess impressive fortifications. It really did experience violent destruction more than once. Whether one of those destructions inspired Homer's epic, that remains wonderfully complicated. History rarely offers tidy answers. Imagine approaching Troy from the sea. Merchant vessels gather near the shore. Some arrive from the Greek mainland. Others from Cyprus. Still others from Anatolia or the Black Sea. Sailors shout instructions across the harbor. Dockworkers unload amphorae filled with wine. Bronze ingots change hands. Timber is stacked neatly. Fish dry beneath the warm afternoon sun. The city feels alive. Busy. Confident. Its prosperity depends upon movement. Exactly like Mycenae. Exactly like Pylos. Exactly like dozens of other Bronze Age centers scattered across the eastern Mediterranean. The entire world has become connected. Not politically. Not peacefully. But economically. And interconnected systems possess a curious weakness. When one part begins failing, everything else eventually notices. For now, however, almost nobody worries. Kings exchange gifts. Merchants profit. Harvests remain reliable. Ships continue arriving. The world seems stable. Perhaps even permanent. That comforting illusion extends far beyond Troy. Travel eastward into Anatolia itself. The roads climb steadily toward the great Hittite capital of Hattusa. Here stands one of the largest empires on earth. Massive stone gates guard sprawling administrative complexes. Temple after temple fills the city. Royal archives preserve thousands of clay tablets recording treaties, military campaigns, diplomatic correspondence, and legal disputes. The Hittites write everything down. Fortunately for historians. Less fortunately for scribes whose workload appears endless. Somewhere within these archives appear references to Ahiawa. The name echoes quietly across centuries. Many historians now believe it refers to the Mycenaean Greeks. If true, then mainland Greece was not isolated. Far from it. Its rulers negotiated with emperors, signed agreements, argued over territories, supported foreign princes, interfered in overseas politics. In other words, they behaved exactly as powerful states usually do. Diplomacy proves far older than democracy. Imagine two ambassadors meeting near the Hittite court. One wears finely woven Mycenaean robes fastened with polished bronze pins. The other represents the great king of the Hittites. Neither fully trusts the other. Both smile politely. Gifts are exchanged. Compliments offered. Hidden meanings carefully concealed beneath courteous conversation. The translators work tirelessly. Every word matters. One misplaced phrase might accidentally begin a war. One imagines diplomatic interpreters developing gray hair considerably earlier than everyone else. Far to the south, Egypt watches all of this with experienced eyes. During the reigns of powerful pharaohs like Amenhotep III and Ramesses II, Egypt stands among the greatest civilizations on earth. Letters travel constantly between royal courts. These famous diplomatic documents, discovered at Amarna, reveal kings addressing one another almost like members of an exclusive international club. They call each other brother. They exchange gifts. Occasionally they complain rather directly about gifts that are insufficiently impressive. One Near Eastern king even writes, in essence, "The gold you sent last time wasn't nearly as good as before." Diplomatic etiquette has apparently changed less than one might expect. Prestige mattered enormously. Luxury objects were political statements. A beautifully crafted drinking cup could strengthen alliances. An insultingly modest present might weaken them. Every exchange carried meaning beyond its obvious value. The Mycenaeans understood this well. Gold cups, decorated swords, fine pottery, perfumed oils, elegant textiles. Everything announced status. Everything demonstrated capability. Meanwhile, ordinary sailors crossing between these kingdoms knew little of grand diplomacy. They cared about wind, weather, fresh water, food supplies, safe harbors. Their lives unfolded according to practical realities. Imagine a merchant vessel caught unexpectedly in an autumn storm. Clouds gather with frightening speed. The sea darkens. Wind tears violently against the square sail. Crewmen scramble across the pitching deck. Ropes strain. Wood groans. Rain arrives sideways. Waves crash over the bow. The captain shouts orders nearly impossible to hear. The shoreline disappears. For hours the ship rises and falls through mountains of water. Every prayer suddenly feels sincere. When dawn finally breaks, exhausted sailors discover they have survived. Barely. They thank Poseidon. Or perhaps apologize to him. With sea gods, caution seems wise. Experiences like these naturally become stories. Stories become memories. Memories become legends. The waves were taller than palace walls. The wind screamed like angry spirits. We drifted for 9 days without seeing land. Every retelling grows richer. Not dishonest. Simply human. Centuries later, when Homer describes Odysseus battling impossible storms sent by Poseidon himself, audiences immediately understand. They know sailors. They know storms. They know how quickly the sea transforms confidence into humility. The gods merely provide familiar explanations. Back in Mycenae, evening settles over the palace. The Wanex receives another delegation from overseas. Perhaps traders from Cyprus. Perhaps messengers from another Greek kingdom. Perhaps ambassadors carrying carefully worded letters from Anatolia. Servants pour wine. Bronze lamps flicker softly. Outside, musicians play quiet melodies drifting through open courtyards. The palace appears magnificent, efficient, secure. Its storerooms remain full. Its workshops continue producing wealth. Its scribes continue recording every allocation of bronze and every delivery of grain. Nothing seems amiss. Yet unseen pressures are beginning to accumulate across the Mediterranean. Trade routes are growing more fragile. Climate patterns may be shifting. Powerful kingdoms increasingly compete for dwindling resources. Minor conflicts become larger ones. Larger conflicts interrupt commerce. Interrupted commerce delays bronze shipments. Delayed bronze shipments weaken armies. Weak armies invite opportunistic neighbors. Like carefully balanced pottery stacked upon a shelf. Everything depends upon everything else. Nobody notices the first tremor. They rarely do. Tonight, however, none of those worries disturb the palace feast. The storyteller begins another familiar tale. He sings of distant voyages, clever captains, faithful companions, rich cities across the sea. His audience listens beside the glowing hearth. The children sitting quietly near the back cannot know it. Neither can the old warriors smiling into their wine. But they are living inside the very age that future generations will call the Age of Heroes. Not because everyone behaved heroically. They certainly did not. Kings remained ambitious. Merchants remained greedy. Politicians remained politicians. Human nature has displayed remarkable consistency. No. It became the Age of Heroes because memory softened its edges. History slowly became legend. Legend slowly became poetry. And somewhere between the two, the real world of Mycenaean Greece quietly transformed into the immortal world of the Iliad and the Odyssey. The transformation has already begun. The collapse has not. But the shadow of it is drawing steadily closer. The war remembered. Did the Trojan War really happen? The fire has burned low. Only a few glowing embers remain in the center of the Megaron. Outside, the palace has fallen quiet. The last footsteps of servants have faded into the corridors, and somewhere beyond the walls, a night wind moves gently through the cypress trees. This is the hour when stories become larger than life. When certainty quietly goes to sleep, and memory begins to dream. For nearly 3,000 years, one question has refused to disappear. Did the Trojan War actually happen? It sounds like a simple question. History, unfortunately, has never been especially fond of simple questions. If you had asked a Greek living in the 5th century BC, the answer would have been immediate. Of course it happened. Everyone knew about Troy. Everyone knew Achilles. Everyone knew Agamemnon, Menelaus, Hector, Ajax, Odysseus, Helen, Priam, and Paris. These were not fictional characters to them. They were ancestors. Heroes. Real people whose deeds had simply taken place long ago. As real as Julius Caesar would later seem to the Romans. As real as Charlemagne to medieval Europe. As real as any great founder remembered through generations. Homer had given them immortal voices. But Homer was not writing history. He was preserving memory. Those two things overlap, without ever becoming exactly the same. Imagine sitting beside that same palace hearth nearly 500 years after Mycenae itself has fallen. The palace is gone. The lion gate still stands. But weeds grow where kings once walked. Children play among fallen stones without knowing who built them. A wandering singer arrives carrying only a lyre. He begins to sing. Not from a scroll. Not from a written book. Everything lives inside his memory. Thousands upon thousands of carefully arranged verses. The audience already knows many of the names. But they listen anyway. Because every performance is different. Every storyteller emphasizes different moments. Every audience prefers different heroes. This is oral tradition. Not frozen. Living. Changing. Breathing. By the time these poems are finally written down centuries later, they already contain layer upon layer of memory. Some details belong to the Bronze Age. Others reflect Homer's own world. Still others belong somewhere in between. Imagine trying to reconstruct your great-great-great-grandparents' lives using stories passed through 20 generations. Some details remain astonishingly accurate. Others quietly drift. Someone remembers the family house correctly, but forgets the color of its roof. Another remembers a great flood, but accidentally combines it with a different storm. Memory protects the important things. The smaller pieces become rearranged. The Iliad works much the same way. Take the armor. Many heroes fight with equipment that resembles genuine Mycenaean bronze armor. The famous boar's tusk helmets appear exactly where archaeology says they should. Large figure-8 shields resemble artistic depictions from the Bronze Age. Some weapons fit the archaeological evidence beautifully. Yet elsewhere, the poems describe customs from centuries after Mycenae had disappeared. Iron weapons appear more frequently. Funeral practices belong to a later era. Political structures sometimes resemble the Greece of Homer rather than the Greece of Agamemnon. It is as though two different centuries have quietly agreed to share the same stage. Neither completely replaces the other. This mixture once confused historians. Now it fascinates them. The poems are not newspaper reports. They are cultural memory. A river carrying fragments from many different ages. Then there is Helen. According to legend, the most beautiful woman in the world. A queen whose abduction, or perhaps elopement, depending upon which ancient author is telling the story, launches a war involving hundreds of ships. It is wonderfully dramatic. Wonderfully human. Wonderfully poetic. It also asks us to believe that dozens of kings would spend 10 years besieging an immensely fortified city primarily because one marriage encountered complications. History gently raises an eyebrow. Perhaps Helen represents something larger. Perhaps she symbolizes royal prestige, political legitimacy, an alliance broken. Or perhaps Homer simply understood something fundamental. People remember stories about love. Very few audiences become emotionally invested in disputes over maritime taxation. Imagine two Bronze Age kings sitting across a table. One wants safer trade routes through the Dardanelles. The other prefers controlling those routes himself. It is a perfectly realistic disagreement. It is also unlikely to inspire one of the greatest epics in world literature. Now replace trade negotiations with a beautiful queen. Immediately the story becomes unforgettable. Poets know exactly what they are doing. The city itself, however, that is another matter. Modern archaeology tells us Troy was no imaginary place. Excavations reveal strong defensive walls, wide gateways, watchtowers, large storage areas, evidence of prosperity, evidence of international trade, evidence of destruction. Around the late 13th or early 12th century BC, roughly the traditional era associated with the Trojan War, the city experienced violence. Walls collapsed. Buildings burned. People died. Was this Homer's war? Perhaps. Perhaps not. Ancient cities suffered wars rather frequently. Being destroyed once every few centuries was, sadly, almost an occupational hazard. Yet timing matters. Location matters. The Hittite records matter. Taken together, they paint a remarkably intriguing picture. Not proof. History almost never offers proof that neat. But possibility. Strong possibility. Imagine standing upon Troy's western wall during those uncertain years. The afternoon sun glitters across the sea. Far beyond the horizon, tiny sails appear. Perhaps merchants. Perhaps fishermen. Perhaps something else. The guards cannot yet know. Every approaching ship carries questions. Friend? Enemy? Customer? Invader? Sometimes the answers change before sunset. Inside the city, life continues despite uncertainty. Potters shape clay. Smiths repair tools. Children race through narrow streets. Priests prepare offerings. The king receives messengers. Normal life possesses remarkable determination. Even when history gathers outside the gate. Across the sea, the Mycenaean kingdoms watch closely. Whether they truly assembled one enormous coalition under Agamemnon, no one can say. More likely, relationships proved considerably messy. Some kingdoms cooperated. Others argued. Some remained neutral. Others pursued opportunities independently. Human politics rarely display the tidy organization later storytellers prefer. Still, the Mycenaeans certainly possessed ships. They certainly possessed ambitious rulers. They certainly conducted military expeditions overseas. The archaeological record leaves little doubt about that. Their pottery appears across the eastern Mediterranean. Their influence reaches Cyprus. Their merchants visit Egypt. Their diplomats appear in Hittite correspondence. A campaign against an important Anatolian city no longer sounds impossible. Quite the opposite. It sounds entirely plausible. Perhaps several campaigns occurred over generations. Perhaps Homer blended them into one magnificent narrative. Memory often compresses decades into moments. Entire wars become a single siege. Multiple kings become one alliance. Many victories become one glorious triumph. That is not deception. It is storytelling. As night deepens over Bronze Age Greece, another feast unfolds inside Mycenae. The wine flows generously. The musicians play softly. An old warrior speaks quietly with younger men seated nearby. His beard has turned silver. His hands bear scars faded almost white. When he speaks of distant campaigns, everyone listens. Perhaps he crossed the sea years ago. Perhaps he fought in western Anatolia. Perhaps he saw the walls of a city whose name future generations will barely remember. His memories are imperfect. Time has blurred them. Victories seem brighter. Losses feel heavier. Friends who died young remain forever young. That is how memory works. A boy sitting nearby hears every word. He will remember the old man's stories. Not perfectly. No one ever does. But he will remember enough. One day he will tell his own children. They will tell theirs. The details will slowly change. The emotions will not. Centuries later, somewhere in Ionia, a blind poet, or perhaps several poets whose voices later become one, will gather these ancient memories together. He will shape them into verses so beautiful that they survive when palaces have become ruins, when kingdoms have become myths, when bronze itself has given way to iron. The names will live forever. Achilles, Hector, Helen, Odysseus, Agamemnon. Yet beneath every line of poetry, there remains another world. A quieter world. The real world. The world of accountants recording sheep, bronzesmiths repairing swords, women weaving wool, children chasing goats through dusty villages, kings worrying about grain supplies, merchants praying for favorable winds. That ordinary world, the one archaeology patiently uncovers, is every bit as fascinating as the legends it inspired. Perhaps even more so. Because heroes belong to poetry. Ordinary people belong to history. And tonight, as the stars shine over Mycenae once again, both worlds still exist together. For just a little while longer. Soon, the songs will become all that remains. Because the greatest catastrophe this civilization has ever known is already approaching across the horizon. The age of heroes is nearing its end. The age of collapse is about to begin. When the world began to break, the gathering storm before the Bronze Age collapse. If you had walked through the gates of Mycenae on an ordinary summer afternoon around the year 1225 BC, you probably would not have noticed anything unusual. The palace still stood proudly above the valley. Its storerooms remained full. Its bronze workshops still echoed with the familiar rhythm of hammers striking glowing metal. Merchants still arrived carrying cargo from distant shores. Children still chased one another through dusty streets. The king still received ambassadors beneath painted ceilings. Everything appeared normal. History is remarkably deceptive that way. Civilizations rarely announce that they are approaching the end of an age. They almost always look strongest just before they begin to unravel. Imagine standing once again upon the great walls of Mycenae. The afternoon air shimmers with heat. Cicadas sing relentlessly from olive trees below. The distant sea glitters beneath a cloudless sky. Nothing seems capable of disturbing this peaceful scene. Yet beyond that bright horizon, invisible threads are already beginning to snap. The Mycenaeans do not yet realize how many things must continue working for their civilization to survive. Copper must continue arriving from Cyprus. Tin must continue arriving from distant lands. Merchant ships must continue sailing safely. Neighboring kingdoms must remain reasonably stable. Harvests must remain dependable. Roads must remain open. Kings must continue trusting one another just enough to keep trade flowing. It is a complicated machine. Beautifully balanced. Dangerously balanced. The palace economy resembles an elaborate spider's web stretched across the Mediterranean. Every strand supports another. Touch one corner. The vibration spreads everywhere. At first, the changes are almost impossible to notice. A merchant vessel arrives later than expected. The captain apologizes. Unexpected storms. Nothing serious. Another caravan from Anatolia brings less tin than usual. Supply problems? Temporary, surely. A harvest produces slightly less grain than the year before. The weather has been strange lately. Everyone shrugs. There have always been difficult years. There will be better ones. Surely. Human beings possess an extraordinary ability to interpret warning signs as temporary inconveniences. It is one of our oldest talents. Far away in Anatolia, the mighty Hittite Empire faces increasing difficulties. Border conflicts multiply. Food shortages appear in certain regions. Letters between officials begin mentioning concerns that would have sounded almost unthinkable only a generation earlier. One surviving Hittite document speaks of grain shipments with unmistakable urgency. Food. Not glory. Not conquest. Food. Even great empires eventually discover that empty stomachs care very little about political prestige. To the south, Egypt remains powerful. But even the pharaohs begin recording unusual threats. Groups of unfamiliar raiders appear along coastlines. Piracy increases. Trade routes become less predictable. Fortified settlements begin strengthening their defenses. No single event causes alarm. Instead, small uncertainties begin accumulating like dark clouds before an autumn storm. Imagine yourself aboard another merchant vessel crossing the eastern Mediterranean. Only this voyage feels different. The captain scans the horizon more often than usual. His crew keeps weapons within easy reach. At sunset they choose sheltered anchorages instead of sleeping in open water. Rumors travel faster than ships. Every harbor tells a similar story. A settlement burned somewhere along the coast. A caravan disappeared inland. Another palace requesting emergency supplies. Nobody possesses the entire picture. Everyone possesses one small piece of it. Together, those pieces begin forming something deeply unsettling. Back in Mycenae, the palace administration works harder than ever. More tablets. More inventories. More careful accounting. It is tempting to imagine that growing bureaucracy reflects growing confidence. Sometimes, it reflects growing anxiety. The scribes count every sheep, every jar of oil, every spear, every wheel, every horse, everything. When resources become uncertain, records become precious. Some official somewhere is quietly asking uncomfortable questions. Do we have enough bronze? Enough grain? Enough reserves? Enough men? Enough time? Questions like these rarely remain confined to one kingdom. They spread. Neighboring rulers begin reinforcing palace walls. Not because they expect immediate attack. Because caution seems sensible. Mycenae expands its fortifications. Turin strengthens its defenses. Additional walls appear. Hidden underground cisterns are constructed so defenders can reach fresh water even during a siege. These projects require enormous labor. Enormous expense. No kingdom invests such effort without reason. Something has changed. Not dramatically. Not yet. But enough. Imagine descending into one of those hidden underground passages at Mycenae. The entrance is narrow. Stone steps disappear into darkness. The air grows cooler with every step. Torches flicker against damp limestone walls. Eventually you reach a spring deep beneath the fortress. Fresh water. Protected. Invisible from outside. An extraordinary engineering achievement. It also tells us something important. Someone feared siege. Someone imagined enemies surrounding these mighty walls. Someone believed the future might become less peaceful than the recent past. History whispers long before it shouts. Meanwhile, ordinary villagers continue living ordinary lives. Farmers cannot postpone planting because distant kingdoms appear nervous. Goats still require tending. Children still require feeding. Olive trees still require pruning. Life possesses tremendous momentum. Most people experience history gradually. Not through dramatic headlines, but through subtle changes. Prices rise. Travel becomes less safe. Certain goods disappear from markets. Neighbors speak more quietly about distant events. The world feels different, without anyone being entirely sure why. One summer evening, merchants gather around a small fire near the harbor. They share wine after unloading cargo. Conversation turns, as it often does, toward news. One sailor claims an entire city along the Anatolian coast has been abandoned. Another insists pirates now attack ships farther south than ever before. A third laughs. Says sailors always exaggerate. Someone else nods thoughtfully. Perhaps. But not this much. Silence follows. Not frightened silence. Reflective silence. The kind that settles whenever people realize rumors from different directions all seem to point toward the same uncomfortable possibility. Something unusual is happening. Across the sea, another kingdom experiences drought. The rains arrive late. Fields crack beneath relentless sunlight. Wells sink lower. Families begin eating grain reserved for next year's planting. No catastrophe. Not yet. But another thread has weakened. Modern scientists studying ancient pollen, tree rings, cave formations, and lake sediments have discovered evidence suggesting that parts of the eastern Mediterranean experience prolonged periods of climatic instability during these centuries. Less rainfall. Repeated drought. Environmental stress. Climate alone did not destroy the Bronze Age. History is rarely that simple. But climate may have nudged an already complicated system toward crisis. Think of an aging bridge. One loose bolt causes little concern. Another appears. Then another. Heavy traffic continues crossing every day. Eventually, one final strain becomes too much. The bridge does not collapse because of one bolt. It collapses because every weakness arrived together. The Bronze Age world appears increasingly similar. Political tension. Economic disruption. Climate instability. Piracy. Migration. Local rebellions. International rivalries. Trade interruptions. None alone prove fatal. Together, they become something no palace administrator has ever faced before. Night settles once more over Mycenae. The Lion Gate stands silent beneath moonlight. Its stone guardians have watched generations come and go. They have seen prosperous harvests, royal weddings, victorious armies, magnificent feasts. They have also witnessed worried messengers arriving after dark. Extra guards posted along the walls. Additional grain stored beneath palace floors. Small changes. Sensible changes. Necessary changes. The Wanax retires for the evening believing he still commands one of the greatest kingdoms in Greece. He is not mistaken. Mycenae remains wealthy, powerful, respected. Its people cannot imagine these walls ever standing empty. Neither could the inhabitants of countless great cities before them. History has always possessed a quiet sense of irony. Tomorrow the scribes will prepare fresh clay tablets. The blacksmiths will light their furnaces. Merchants will inspect cargo. Farmers will harvest grain beneath the brilliant Mediterranean sun. Everything will appear wonderfully ordinary. And somewhere far beyond the horizon, another city will burn. Another trade route will fail. Another king will lose control. Each event seems isolated. Each event seems manageable. But together they are becoming a tide. A slow-moving tide that no wall, no matter how massive, will be able to stop. The age of heroes has reached its magnificent afternoon. Soon, the long evening will begin. The Bronze Age collapse, when the palaces fell silent. There is something strangely unsettling about abandoned places. Perhaps you have felt it yourself. A deserted farmhouse where the table still stands. An empty train station where no trains arrive. A forgotten castle where only the wind moves through broken windows. The silence feels wrong. Buildings are meant to contain voices. When they do not, the imagination quietly fills the emptiness. 3,200 years ago, that silence began spreading across the eastern Mediterranean. Not all at once. Not in one dramatic week. Civilizations rarely collapse like a single tree struck by lightning. They fall more like forests. One tree. Then another. Then another. Until one day someone notices that the horizon has become strangely empty. Imagine returning to Mycenae after several years away. The road feels familiar. Olive groves still cover the hills. The mountains remain exactly where they have always been. The Lion Gate still rises proudly ahead. Yet something is different. The guards seem more numerous. Their armor no longer gleams quite so brightly. A few sections of the walls have been hastily repaired. The palace still functions. But confidence has begun quietly leaking away. Inside the storerooms, administrators count supplies more frequently. Grain reserves receive careful attention. Bronze is no longer wasted. Weapons are repaired instead of replaced. Every shipment arriving from overseas brings relief. Every delayed shipment brings concern. The kingdom has entered an age where uncertainty itself has become a daily companion. No one yet knows its name. Centuries later, we will call it the Bronze Age collapse. To the people living through it, it is simply life becoming more difficult. Far to the east, the Hittite Empire is beginning to disappear. One of the greatest powers in the ancient world. A kingdom that had challenged Egypt itself. A civilization that filled libraries with treaties and royal correspondence. Then, its records stop. Its capital, Hattusa, is abandoned. Its government vanishes. Not gradually over centuries. Within only a few decades. Imagine walking through those enormous gates after the empire has fallen. The temples stand empty. Administrative offices are silent. Clay tablets lie scattered beneath collapsed roofs. No scribes remain to read them. The empire has become an archaeological site before anyone realizes archaeology will someday exist. Egypt survives. Barely. Pharaoh Ramesses III later records battles against mysterious invaders arriving by both land and sea. His inscriptions speak of enemies unlike those Egypt had faced before. Entire peoples seem to be moving. Families. Ox carts. Warriors. Children. Not merely armies. Migrations. Displacement. Desperation. Modern historians still debate exactly who these groups were. The Egyptians called many of them the Sea Peoples. The name sounds dramatic. Almost mythical. In reality, it probably describes many different communities rather than one unified nation. Some may have come from the Aegean. Some from Anatolia. Some perhaps from places still unknown. They were not monsters. They were human beings. Many were almost certainly refugees as much as raiders. When civilizations fail, people move. They always have. A family fleeing famine looks remarkably similar to an invading army if you happen to live behind the walls they approach. History depends heavily upon perspective. Imagine standing on the deck of a crowded ship somewhere in the eastern Mediterranean. Not a wealthy merchant vessel now. Something different. Families huddle beneath rough blankets. Children cling to frightened parents. Bundles containing everything they own lie stacked beside them. Behind them. Home no longer exists. Ahead, only uncertainty. Storm clouds gather above the sea. No one knows where they will eventually land. No one knows whether they will be welcomed or resisted. The Bronze Age world is becoming a landscape of movement. Back in Greece, the palace kingdoms begin falling one after another. The sequence varies. The details differ. But the pattern is unmistakable. Thebes suffers destruction. Orchomenos declines. Pylus burns. Tiryns is damaged. Mycenae itself is struck. Archaeologists uncover thick layers of ash inside these once glorious centers. Collapsed walls, burned timbers, broken pottery, abandoned workshops. The fires must have been enormous. Imagine the night Mycenae burns. The first sign is probably smoke. Someone smells it before they see it. Then shouting. Running footsteps. Bronze weapons hastily gathered. The alarm spreads through narrow streets. The palace servants rush towards storerooms. Guards race for the gates. Families pull frightened children from their beds. Outside the walls, perhaps enemies gather. Perhaps they are already inside. Perhaps rebellion has erupted within. We simply do not know. History preserves the fire. It rarely preserves its exact cause. Flames climb the cedar beams supporting the megaron. Painted frescoes blacken beneath unbearable heat. The great wooden roof groans, cracks, collapses. The throne disappears beneath burning timbers. Generations of administrative records suddenly face destruction. Yet in one of history's most extraordinary accidents, the intense heat bakes thousands of soft clay tablets into hard ceramic. The palace dies. Its archives survive. Sometimes catastrophe accidentally becomes preservation. The scribes who pressed those tiny signs into damp clay never imagined anyone would read them 3,000 years later. They certainly never imagined people would someday debate them on glowing screens connected by invisible signals crossing the planet. History enjoys impossible ironies. Morning arrives. Smoke still rises from the ruins. The palace no longer governs. Its officials are gone. Its bureaucracy has vanished almost overnight. Without the palace, everything changes. The workshops stop receiving bronze. Textile production slows dramatically. Long-distance trade nearly disappears. Taxes are no longer collected in the old way. Religious ceremonies lose their central organization. The entire administrative web has been cut. Imagine removing the heart from a living body. Many parts remain intact. For a while. Then slowly, everything else begins failing too. Villages survive. People survive. Life continues. But the world they understood has ended. This distinction matters. The Mycenaean people do not vanish. There is no mysterious disappearance. No magical extinction. Farmers continue farming. Shepherds continue tending flocks. Children continue growing into adults. What disappears is the civilization, the palace system, the bureaucracy, the international trade network, the concentrated political power, the Bronze Age world itself. Generations born afterward inherit something profoundly different. Imagine a little boy born 20 years after the fall of Mycenae. He has never seen the palace functioning. He has never watched foreign ambassadors arrive carrying gifts from Egypt. He has never known scribes recording shipments of Cypriot copper. To him, the burned ruins above the valley are simply old. His grandfather occasionally points toward the broken walls. There used to be kings there. The boy looks at the shattered stones. It is difficult to imagine. Children always assume the world has always looked the way it does now. The old man remembers differently. He remembers processions, festivals, bronze shining beneath the sun, busy storerooms, music echoing through the megaron. His grandson knows only silence. This is how civilizations pass from memory into legend. One conversation at a time. The roads become quieter. Merchant ships become fewer. Luxury goods become rare. Bronze itself grows increasingly scarce. Iron, once little more than an exotic curiosity, slowly becomes more practical. Not immediately, not dramatically, but steadily. History rarely replaces one age with another overnight. The Bronze Age does not simply end. It slowly gives way, like daylight fading into dusk. As evening settles once more over the ruined palace, the wind moves gently through roofless halls. Grass begins growing between fallen stones. Owls nest where scribes once worked. Foxes wander through abandoned courtyards. The lion gate still stands. Its great carved guardians continue watching the valley exactly as they always have. They have witnessed prosperity, power, wealth, fire, silence. Now they watch time itself. The age of heroes has ended. Not because the heroes all died, but because the world that created them no longer exists. Soon people will begin forgetting. Names will survive. Stories will survive. The details will slowly drift into myth. And somewhere, around another evening fire, an old storyteller will begin with words that sound almost unbelievable. There was once a king. His listeners will smile politely. They will wonder whether such magnificent cities ever truly existed. The storyteller will smile back. He remembers enough to know they did. Even if the world never looks like that again. The long night, Greece after the fall of the palaces. The morning after the end of a civilization does not look especially dramatic. The sun still rises. Birds still sing from the olive trees. The sea continues rolling gently onto familiar shores, entirely indifferent to the concerns of kings. If you had wandered through southern Greece a few years after the palace at Mycenae burned, you might not have immediately realized that one of Europe's first great civilizations had just collapsed. The fields were still there. The mountains had not moved. Goats, with their legendary commitment to ignoring human plans, still wandered wherever they pleased. Nature rarely pauses for history. People, meanwhile, had little choice but to continue living. A farmer cannot postpone planting because an empire has ended. Children cannot delay growing up until politics become more stable. Bread must still be baked. Roofs must still be repaired before winter. Life possesses remarkable determination. Imagine leaving the ruined citadel behind and walking into one of the small villages scattered across the countryside. The houses are simpler now. Many are built using materials gathered nearby rather than supplied through palace workshops. The brightly painted walls of royal halls are gone. Imported luxury goods have become uncommon. Bronze tools are repaired over and over again until there is almost nothing left to repair. Nothing is wasted. Every broken knife becomes another tool. Every damaged spear becomes another blade. Every scrap of metal becomes precious. People have become extraordinarily practical. They have no alternative. The great trading networks that once stretched from Greece to Egypt, Cyprus, and the Levant have largely disappeared. Not completely. Trade never vanishes entirely. But it becomes smaller, slower, more local. Imagine standing at a harbor that, only one generation earlier, welcomed ships from every corner of the eastern Mediterranean. Now only a handful of fishing boats bob gently against the shore. A merchant vessel arriving from overseas has become an event worth discussing for weeks. Children run toward the docks simply to stare at strangers. Exotic languages have become rare sounds. The world has grown smaller. Or perhaps, people have become smaller inside the world. The old roads are still there. Some are already beginning to disappear beneath weeds. Stone bridges slowly crumble. Watchtowers stand empty. Without centralized governments maintaining them, even impressive infrastructure quietly begins surrendering itself to time. Civilizations often build quickly. Nature dismantles patiently. The silence of the old palaces spreads year by year. Pylos, Thebes, Tiryns, Mycenae. Their magnificent halls become haunted by wind rather than ceremony. The megarons that once echoed with music and diplomacy now echo only with rain dripping through broken roofs. Grass pushes between cracked paving stones. Small trees take root where kings once held court. Owls nest in forgotten storerooms. Foxes slip through collapsed gateways beneath moonlight. The Lion Gate still stands. Its massive stone guardians continue watching the valley. They no longer welcome ambassadors. They no longer intimidate rivals. Now they simply witness the passing centuries with the quiet patience of carved stone. One almost imagines they are waiting. Not for kings. For memory. Because memory is becoming fragile. The people who actually lived under the palace system are growing old. Their grandchildren know a different world. Imagine sitting beside a village fire on an autumn evening. The harvest has been gathered. Rain taps softly against the roof. An elderly man warms his hands near the flames. His grandson, perhaps 8 years old, listens quietly. "You see those walls on the hill?" the old man asks. The child nods. "There used to be a king there." The boy looks puzzled. "A real king?" The old man smiles. "Yes." "Were there really walls covered in paintings?" There were. "Were there really rooms filled with gold?" There were. "Were there really ships from Egypt?" "They came every year." The boy stares into the fire. It sounds impossible. Almost magical. The old man is not lying. But memory has already begun changing shape. Every time he tells the story, the palace grows slightly grander. The feasts become slightly richer. The warriors become slightly braver. The king becomes slightly wiser. Not because he wishes to deceive anyone. Because memory naturally polishes what survives. The rough edges slowly disappear. Archaeologists sometimes call this period the Greek Dark Age. The name can be misleading. It does not mean people suddenly forgot how to think. Nor does it mean Greece became permanently miserable. Rather, it is dark because fewer written records survive. The lights have gone out. Not necessarily in people's lives, but in our ability to see them clearly. Without palace scribes pressing linear beyond to clay tablets, history becomes quieter. Almost invisible. Writing itself largely disappears from mainland Greece. Imagine that for a moment. A civilization that once carefully recorded thousands of administrative details gradually stops writing altogether. Generations grow up unable to read because there is nothing left to read. The knowledge fades. Not violently. Simply through lack of use. It is one of history's strangest disappearances. Words continue to exist. Songs continue. Stories continue. But writing itself slips away. For nearly 4 centuries. It will eventually return. When it does, it will arrive in a completely different form. Borrowed from Phoenician traders. Adapted into something extraordinary. The Greek alphabet. The alphabet that would eventually preserve philosophy, science, drama, mathematics, and Homer himself. But that belongs to another age. Tonight, the written word has gone silent. The storytellers have become more important than ever. Without books, people become libraries. Imagine one of those storytellers. His cloak is faded. His beard has turned white. His lyre shows signs of careful repair. He travels from village to village carrying almost nothing except memory. Entire generations gather whenever he arrives. Children sit closest to the fire. Adults pretend they are there only for the company. Secretly, they love the stories just as much. He begins slowly. There was once a city beside the sea. Immediately the audience grows still. The storyteller speaks of kings whose halls glittered with bronze, of ships with black sails crossing endless water, of impossible journeys, faithful friends, treacherous enemies, clever captains, beautiful queens, angry gods, terrible monsters. The stories grow with every telling. Reality and imagination stop arguing. Instead, they begin cooperating. History provides the bones. Poetry supplies the flesh. Memory breathes life into both. Somewhere in those long evenings, the first true shape of the Odyssey begins to emerge. Not exactly as we know it. Not yet. But pieces are gathering. A dangerous voyage remembered by one family. A siege recalled by another. A clever king preserved in local tradition. Storms, shipwrecks, hospitality, homecoming, loss, hope. They drift together like separate streams, eventually joining the same river. Meanwhile, ordinary life slowly improves. Not immediately. Recovery rarely works that way. But generation after generation learns to adapt. Communities become more self-sufficient. Iron tools slowly replace bronze. Small local leaders emerge. Trade cautiously expands once more. The world is different now. Less centralized. Less wealthy. Perhaps, in some ways, more resilient. There is an old saying among historians that civilizations do not truly disappear. They transform. The Mycenaeans did not vanish. Their descendants continued farming these same valleys, fishing these same coasts, climbing these same mountains, watching these same stars. They inherited fewer palaces, but they inherited something else. Memory. Memory is remarkably difficult to destroy. A palace can burn in one night. A story may survive 3,000 years. That may be the greatest lesson of all. As darkness settles over Greece once again, the ruined citadels lie quiet beneath the moon. Grass bends gently in the night breeze. Somewhere beyond the hills, wolves call across empty valleys. The old kingdoms have passed into silence. But their voices, if you listen carefully enough, have not entirely disappeared. They are waiting inside songs, waiting inside legends, waiting for a poet who has not yet been born. A poet who will gather the scattered fragments of a forgotten age and weave them into the two greatest epics the ancient world would ever know. The world behind the Odyssey has almost vanished. The Odyssey itself is only beginning. A poet finds the ruins, how Homer turned history into immortality. There are moments when history quietly disappears. Not because it has been destroyed, but because no one is left who remembers it firsthand. The last palace scribe has long since died. The final king who once sat upon the throne inside the Megaron has become dust beneath the same hills he once ruled. The children who watched Mycenae burn grew old. Their grandchildren grew old. Then their grandchildren. A century passes. Then another. The world changes so slowly that almost nobody notices it changing. By now, if you climb the road toward Mycenae, the journey would feel strangely peaceful. Wild grasses ripple between fallen stones. Tiny flowers bloom where royal processions once marched. Swallows nest beneath cracked arches. The enormous cyclopean walls remain standing, stubbornly refusing to surrender to time. Those walls have seen kings. Now they watch shepherds. A flock of sheep wanders through the outer ruins. The shepherd pauses beneath the lion gate. Perhaps he glances upward. Perhaps he does not. To him, these ancient stones have always been here. Children grow up assuming ancient ruins are simply another feature of the landscape. Much as they assume mountains have always existed. Ruins become ordinary surprisingly quickly. Yet people continue asking questions. Who built these walls? Why are the stones so enormous? Who lived here? Why did they leave? Every generation invents new answers. One old woman insists giants built them. A traveler claims gods helped lift the stones. A veteran returning from distant lands says foreign kings once ruled there. Nobody really knows anymore. Knowledge has quietly transformed into folklore. The Greeks of this later age would eventually explain the impossible walls by imagining the Cyclopes, one-eyed giants of extraordinary strength. It was, in fairness, a reasonable conclusion. Standing before those immense limestone blocks even today, one briefly wonders whether ordinary humans truly managed such a feat. Then one remembers what determined engineers, thousands of laborers, and ambitious rulers can accomplish. History often appears supernatural simply because people worked unbelievably hard. Imagine arriving at one of these ruined palaces as a traveling singer. Your sandals are dusty. Your cloak smells faintly of wood smoke after weeks spent sleeping beside village fires. A simple lyre hangs across your shoulder. Everything you own can be carried on your back. Everything valuable you possess exists inside your memory. You walk through broken gateways. Grass brushes against your ankles. The great hall has no roof. Sunlight pours into the empty megaron where kings once received ambassadors. Only birds remain. The silence feels almost sacred. One cannot stand inside such ruins without imagining voices. Laughter. Music. The clatter of bronze cups. The crackling of great hearth fires. Footsteps. Commands. Arguments. Celebrations. The building itself encourages memory. Even if the details have faded. Perhaps this is exactly what happened. Perhaps poets wandered among ruins much like these. Perhaps they listened to old local stories. Perhaps they combined them with songs already known across Greece. Perhaps they added imagination where memory had grown thin. No one can know for certain. But one thing becomes increasingly clear. The world described by Homer contains echoes of places exactly like Mycenae. The great hall of Odysseus resembles a megaron. The palace of Nestor recalls Pylos. Agamemnon rules from Mycenae. The architecture may belong partly to memory, partly to imagination, partly to both. It is tempting to think of Homer as writing fiction. That is not quite right. Nor was he writing modern history. He was preserving cultural memory. Imagine taking hundreds of broken pieces of colored glass. Each comes from a different window. Different centuries. Different places. Different families. Now arrange them into one magnificent mosaic. The result is new. Yet every piece remains ancient. That is what the Iliad and Odyssey seem to accomplish. Fragments of Bronze Age reality, woven together with later customs, strengthened by poetry, given immortality through rhythm. The heroes themselves become larger than history. Take Odysseus, the clever king of Ithaca, the patient traveler, the man who survives because he thinks before striking. Was there truly a king named Odysseus? Perhaps. Perhaps not. That question may actually miss the point. Because Odysseus feels like the memory of countless Bronze Age captains. Men who crossed unpredictable seas, negotiated with suspicious strangers, survived storms through experience rather than strength, returned home years later carrying stories nobody entirely believed. He is one man. He is also many men. The same may be true of Achilles, the greatest warrior. Brilliant, fearsome, fatally proud, Every generation produces extraordinary fighters. History remembers only a few. Poetry sometimes gathers several remarkable lives into one unforgettable character. Then there is Agamemnon, King of Kings, commander of the Greek expedition, the ruler of Mycenae. Archaeology tells us Mycenae truly was one of the most powerful palace centers in Bronze Age Greece. Its wealth was astonishing, its fortifications unmatched. If later storytellers wished to imagine the greatest Greek king, choosing Mycenae made perfect sense. History quietly shaped mythology once again. Even the famous voyage of the Odyssey feels surprisingly grounded beneath its layers of fantasy. Strip away the Cyclops. Set aside the sirens. Ignore the witch Circe for just a moment. What remains? A sailor, trying to get home, blown off course by weather, meeting unfamiliar cultures, searching constantly for safe harbors, watching companions disappear one by one, trusting stars more than maps. That describes countless real Bronze Age voyages. The monsters simply gave emotional shape to very real dangers. A whirlpool becomes Scylla and Charybdis. A dangerous coastline becomes the land of the Cyclops. Isolation becomes Calypso's island. The sea itself encourages imagination. Anyone who has watched fog swallow an entire coastline understands why sailors filled empty horizons with mythical creatures. Night falls differently at sea. Darkness arrives without city lights. The stars become impossibly bright. The horizon disappears completely. Only the sound of waves remains. It is easy to believe extraordinary things when surrounded by endless water. Perhaps easier than believing nothing at all. Back on land, Greek society slowly changes once more. Villages grow larger. Trade returns. Iron replaces bronze. New forms of leadership emerge. The alphabet arrives from Phoenician traders and is transformed into something wonderfully flexible. For the first time in centuries, Greek words can be written again. Imagine the moment someone first decides to write down one of the old songs. Perhaps listeners worry. Songs belong in memory. Why imprison them upon a surface? Others disagree. The old singers are dying. What happens if no one remembers? Write it down. Preserve it. Save it. Whether Homer himself could write remains uncertain. Whether there even was a single Homer remains uncertain. Perhaps many singers gradually shaped these poems. Perhaps one extraordinary genius unified them. History smiles politely and declines to answer. Sometimes mystery becomes part of the inheritance. Whoever Homer was, the result changed the world. Without those poems, Mycenaean Greece might have vanished almost completely from human memory. The palaces would still exist beneath layers of earth. Archaeologists would eventually uncover them. But there would be no Achilles, no Hector, no Penelope patiently weaving by day and secretly unraveling her work each night. No wooden horse. No wine-dark sea. No Odysseus longing for home beneath unfamiliar stars. Poetry rescued history. Not perfectly, but powerfully. As midnight settles across the ruins of Mycenae, imagine one last wandering singer standing quietly beneath the Lion Gate. He pauses before continuing his journey. The ancient stone lions still gaze outward exactly as they did centuries before. Kings have vanished. Empires have vanished. Languages have changed. Yet the gate remains. The singer smiles. Perhaps he whispers a few familiar lines beneath his breath. Not because he expects the ruins to answer, but because stories have a curious habit of keeping places alive long after the people who built them are gone. Tomorrow he will arrive in another village. Another fire will be lit. Another audience will gather. Children will lean forward. Old men will nod knowingly. Women spinning wool will quietly pause to listen. The story will begin once more. There was once a city beside the sea. And just like that, the world of Mycenaean Greece will live for another generation. Not inside palaces. Not inside royal archives. But inside human memory. A far stronger fortress than stone could ever be. The rediscovery, when the buried kingdom rose again. There is a peculiar kind of sleep that belongs only to ruins. Not the sleep of a tired traveler. Not the sleep that follows a long day's work. Something deeper. A silence measured not in hours, but in centuries. After the last songs faded from the halls of Mycenae. After the last palace roof finally collapsed beneath rain and time. After the descendants of its kings became ordinary farmers. The ancient citadel settled into a sleep that would last nearly 3,000 years. Seasons passed with astonishing patience. Spring covered the broken stones with tiny wildflowers. Summer baked the limestone beneath an unforgiving Mediterranean sun. Autumn rains seeped into forgotten stairways. Winter winds whistled through empty gateways. Again. And again. And again. Empires rose elsewhere. The Persian Empire stretched across continents. Alexander crossed Asia. Rome conquered Greece. Rome itself eventually collapsed. The Byzantine emperors ruled from Constantinople. Crusaders marched east. Ottoman banners fluttered above old fortresses. All the while, the Lion Gate continued watching. Stone possesses remarkable patience. Imagine standing beneath those lions sometime during the Middle Ages. The Great Walls still dominate the landscape. Travelers occasionally pass through. Some pause. Some whisper prayers. Others tell stories. No one truly remembers who built these impossible stones. The old explanation survives. The Cyclopes. Who else could have lifted blocks weighing several tons? The answer seems obvious. Giants. Not engineers. Not thousands of determined laborers. Giants simply make for better conversation. History has a habit of becoming mythology whenever memory grows thin. Generations come and go. Children climb over fallen walls while chasing goats. Shepherds shelter beneath ancient gateways during sudden rainstorms. Local villagers gather loose stones from collapsed buildings to repair their own homes. Not from disrespect. From necessity. Ruins have always served the living. Only much later do people begin protecting them for the dead. Then, many centuries later, the world changes again. Ships grow larger. Maps improve. Ancient books become widely available. Scholars across Europe begin reading Homer with fresh curiosity. One question returns again and again. Could these places have been real? For hundreds of years, many educated people answered politely. Probably not. The poems were magnificent. The heroes unforgettable. But surely Troy belonged alongside Atlantis and other beautiful impossibilities. The Iliad was literature, not geography. Then came a dreamer. Dreamers occupy an unusual place in history. Some become visionaries. Others become cautionary tales. Occasionally, someone manages to become both at once. Imagine a young boy reading the Iliad for the first time. The story sees his imagination completely. Unlike everyone around him, he refuses to believe they are merely myths. He becomes obsessed. Years pass. The boy grows into a wealthy businessman. His childhood fascination never fades. Eventually he decides to search for Homer himself. His name is Heinrich Schliemann. History remembers him with complicated affection. He possessed extraordinary determination, extraordinary confidence, and unfortunately for several archaeological sites. Extraordinary impatience. One might kindly describe him as a man who believed subtlety was something other people worried about. In the 1870s, Schliemann arrives in Greece. He climbs toward Mycenae. The walls still stand. The Lion Gate still towers overhead. Local people know the place well. Legends remain alive. Schliemann believes he has found the kingdom of Agamemnon. His excitement borders on overwhelming. Excavations begin. Workers clear centuries of accumulated earth. Stone emerges. Walls. Doorways. Ancient streets. The buried city slowly begins waking from its impossible sleep. Then comes one astonishing discovery after another. Royal graves. Weapons. Jewelry. Golden drinking cups. Bronze swords. Exquisitely carved seals. And then, gold. So much gold. One autumn day, workers uncover a magnificent funerary mask beaten from thin sheets of gold. Its features stare upward after more than 3,000 years beneath the earth. A solemn face. Strong nose. Carefully shaped beard. Closed eyes. Schliemann becomes convinced. He has found Agamemnon himself. Overcome with excitement, he famously announces to the king of Greece, "I have gazed upon the face of Agamemnon." It is one of archaeology's most famous declarations. It is also almost certainly incorrect. Modern dating suggests the mask was created several centuries before the traditional era of the Trojan War. Agamemnon, if he existed, almost certainly never wore it. But perhaps we should forgive Schliemann his enthusiasm. Imagine standing before an object untouched since before the time of Moses. Before Rome. Before classical Athens. Before the alphabet reached Greece. It would be difficult not to become a little carried away. The mask itself remains extraordinary, even if its owner keeps his true name forever. As excavations continue, the ancient world begins revealing itself piece by piece. The royal shaft graves contain astonishing treasures. Amber from the Baltic. Gold crafted with astonishing precision. Imported materials from Egypt and the Near East. Bronze weapons decorated with intricate scenes. Crystal. Ivory. Silver. The wealth is undeniable. These had not been primitive hill villages. These had been powerful kingdoms connected to the wider Mediterranean world. Exactly as Homer had suggested. Not perfectly, but surprisingly. Imagine the reaction of historians across Europe. For generations they had admired Homer primarily as poetry. Now archaeology quietly whispers, some of this actually happened. Not the Cyclops. Probably not. Not Athena personally intervening in every military decision. Almost certainly not. But the cities? Yes. The kings? Very likely. The world itself? Without question. The Bronze Age suddenly steps out of legend and into history. Meanwhile, archaeologists continue refining their methods. Unlike Schliemann, later researchers proceed carefully. Painfully carefully. Each layer of soil tells a story. Every fragment of pottery matters. Even discarded animal bones become valuable evidence. Modern archaeology often advances at the speed of a patient snail. That patience reveals astonishing details. They discover workshops, drainage systems, storerooms, administrative buildings, religious shrines. Every excavation makes the Mycenaean world feel a little less mythical. Imagine a modern archaeologist kneeling beside a freshly uncovered clay tablet. It appears unimpressive. Small. Brown. Broken. No gold. No jewels. No dramatic masks. Yet it may prove even more important. Because this humble piece of baked clay contains writing. Linear B. For decades, no one can read it. The signs remain mysterious. Silent. Then, in 1952, another breakthrough arrives. An English architect named Michael Ventris, working alongside scholars including John Chadwick, finally helps decipher the script. The result astonishes everyone. The language hidden inside those mysterious symbols is Greek. Not classical Greek. Not the language of Plato. Something older. Much older. The palace scribes of Mycenae had indeed spoken an early form of Greek. Homer's connection to this forgotten world suddenly becomes even stronger. Imagine the excitement. For centuries, people wondered whether the Age of Heroes had any historical foundation. Now the palaces themselves begin speaking. Not through epic poetry. Through inventory lists. 3 jars of olive oil. 2 horses assigned to the chariot workshop. 40 measures of grain. History is wonderfully practical. The great mysteries of civilization are often solved by accountants. There is something deeply comforting about that. The same civilization that inspired Achilles also worried about missing livestock. The same kings who became legends still needed someone to count the sheep. Human beings remain gloriously consistent. As the 20th century progresses, excavations spread across Greece. Pylos, Tiryns, Thebes, Medea. Everywhere archaeologists uncover more evidence of the Bronze Age kingdoms. The map slowly fills in. Trade routes become visible. Political networks emerge. The world behind the Odyssey grows steadily clearer. Not because archaeology proves every legend true. It does something far more interesting. It separates memory from embellishment. The real world turns out to be every bit as fascinating as the mythical one. Perhaps even more so. Because these people were not demigods. They were human beings. They laughed. Argued. Fell in love. Feared drought. Worried about taxes. Raised children. Buried parents. Watched ships disappear beyond the horizon. Dreamed of prosperity. Feared tomorrow. Exactly as we do. The difference between us and them is measured mostly in technology, not in humanity. As evening falls once more over Mycenae, modern visitors climb slowly toward the Lion Gate. Some carry cameras. Others carry guidebooks. Many have read Homer. Few expect to feel emotional. Then they stand before those enormous stones. They place one hand against limestone shaped more than 3,000 years ago. Suddenly, time becomes strangely thin. The same sunset that bathes the walls in golden light once shone upon Bronze Age kings. Upon palace scribes. Upon soldiers returning from distant voyages. Upon children chasing one another through busy courtyards. The centuries briefly seem less like a barrier, and more like a long conversation. The kingdom that inspired the Odyssey was never truly lost. It was simply waiting. Waiting beneath the earth. Waiting beneath legend. Waiting for curious hands and patient minds to listen to its story once again. The real world behind Odysseus, separating myth from memory. By now, the fire has burned down to glowing embers. The palace has fallen. The centuries have passed. The ruins have been rediscovered. Archaeologists have patiently uncovered stones that poets transformed into legends. And perhaps the most interesting question still remains. If Odysseus had truly lived, what would his world have actually looked like? Not the world of monsters. Not the world where gods stepped onto battlefields wearing disguises. Not the world where a single arrow could settle 20 years of resentment in one magnificent afternoon. The real world. Because, as strange as it sounds, reality was already extraordinary enough. Imagine leaving Mycenae one final time. The road winds toward the coast beneath towering pines and scattered olive trees. Morning mist hangs low across the valleys. Shepherds are already awake. Fishing boats appear as tiny dark shapes against the silver sea. Somewhere ahead waits a ship. Not the enormous wooden vessel modern films usually imagine. Bronze Age ships were remarkably modest. Long. Narrow. Built from carefully joined planks stitched and pegged together with astonishing craftsmanship. Most measured perhaps 60 or 70 feet in length. Large enough to cross open seas. Small enough that every sailor knew every other sailor by name. There were no anonymous crews. Only companions. If one man made a mistake, everyone suffered. A captain preparing for departure inspects everything personally. The mast. The square sail. The steering oars. Fresh water. Food stores. Spare ropes. Bronze tools. Repair timber. Nothing can be forgotten. There are no supply depots waiting halfway across the Aegean. No radio calls. No rescue helicopters. No helpful weather forecast explaining that tomorrow afternoon will become somewhat inconvenient. The sea offers only two guarantees: beauty and uncertainty. The sailors push away from shore. The coastline slowly shrinks behind them. Almost immediately, the land begins changing. Mountains become blue shadows. Villages disappear. The familiar world grows distant. Out here, everything depends upon the sky. Navigation in the Bronze Age required patience more than precision. Experienced sailors watched the stars. The rising sun. The setting sun. Wind direction. Cloud formations. Birds. Currents. The color of water. Even the smell of the air. Every tiny clue mattered. The sea itself became a living map. Imagine Odysseus, not necessarily the legendary hero, but the kind of real Mycenaean noble who may have inspired him. He stands near the stern. One hand resting lightly upon the wooden railing polished smooth by years of salt and weather. His eyes never stop moving. He studies the horizon constantly. Not because he expects monsters. Because hidden rocks are considerably less forgiving. Real sailors feared reefs more than cyclopes. One destroys ships much more reliably than the other. As evening approaches, the crew searches for shelter. Contrary to popular imagination, Bronze Age sailors usually preferred remaining close to land whenever possible. Open water voyages certainly occurred, but hugging coastlines reduced unnecessary risks. Each sunset begins the same ritual. Find a sheltered bay. Beach the ship. Pull it safely above the tide. Light a fire. Repair damaged equipment. Cook supper. Sleep beneath unfamiliar stars. Tomorrow. Repeat. Odysseus's famous 10-year journey begins making much more sense when viewed through this reality. A voyage delayed by storms. Forced detours. Political conflicts. Hostile strangers. Damaged ships. Lost companions. Every setback adds weeks. Months. Years. One does not require magic to become lost in the ancient Mediterranean. One requires only bad weather and unfortunate timing. Still, human beings naturally decorate remarkable experiences. Imagine surviving a violent storm near a strange island. The local inhabitants speak an unfamiliar language. Their customs seem bizarre. Their appearance different. Years later, recounting the adventure beside a warm fire. The strangers gradually become giants. Their chief becomes a one-eyed monster. The dangerous cave where supplies were stolen becomes the Cyclops' den. Not because anyone intends deception, but because memory enjoys symbolism. Reality quietly becomes mythology without asking permission. The same process probably shaped many episodes of the Odyssey. Take the sirens. Women whose irresistible songs lure sailors toward destruction. Perhaps they began as dangerous coastal reefs where crashing waves echoed strangely among sea cliffs. Perhaps they reflected the irresistible temptation of stopping at unsafe harbors. Perhaps they represented entirely different dangers now forgotten. Whatever their origin, the emotional truth remains. Distraction kills sailors. Then there is Scylla and Charybdis. Two sea monsters guarding opposite sides of a narrow passage. One devours men. The other swallows entire ships. Modern readers often search for literal monsters. Ancient sailors probably recognized something much more familiar. Treacherous currents. Narrow channels. Hidden whirlpools. The impossible choice between two terrible options. Every experienced captain eventually faced moments exactly like that. Sometimes mythology simply gives terrifying geography a memorable face. Even Poseidon himself, the mighty god of the sea, may reveal something surprisingly human. Imagine spending weeks surrounded by storms beyond anyone's control. The sea appears alive. One day calm as polished glass. The next day roaring with impossible violence. How else should people explain such overwhelming power? Calling the sea Poseidon transforms random chaos into a personality. A dangerous personality, but one capable of listening to prayers. Human beings have always preferred negotiating with someone rather than something. Back on land, the household awaiting the captain's return deserves equal attention. Penelope has become one of literature's greatest symbols of patience. Yet women like her certainly existed throughout the Mycenaean world. Imagine managing an entire estate while your husband spends years overseas. Fields require planting. Servants require supervision. Livestock must be counted. Textiles produced. Children raised. Disputes settled. Guests welcomed. The palace still expects taxes. Neighbors still expect courtesy. Life refuses to pause simply because someone is absent. Linear B tablets quietly confirm this reality. Women oversaw workshops, managed textile production, supervised labor, held important economic responsibilities. The palace world depended heavily upon their work. The poems celebrate warriors. The tablets reveal administrators. Both tell the truth. Just different truths. Consider Telemachus, the son waiting for his father. Countless Bronze-Age children knew similar uncertainty. Ships disappeared. Storms came unexpectedly. Pirates attacked. Wars lasted longer than anyone intended. Fathers sometimes returned. Sometimes they did not. Growing up in such a world meant learning patience remarkably early. The emotional heart of the Odyssey suddenly feels less mythical, less distant. It becomes the universal story of families waiting for someone they love to come home. That story requires no monsters, only hope. As twilight settles over the Aegean, another small vessel slips quietly into a sheltered harbor. The crew unloads jars of olive oil, bundles of wool, perhaps copper ingots from Cyprus, perhaps pottery from the Argolid. Trade continues despite uncertainty. Every successful voyage strengthens the fragile threads connecting distant communities. The Mycenaean world functioned because thousands of such ordinary journeys succeeded. History remembers kings. Civilization depends upon sailors whose names no one records. There is something beautiful about that. Tonight, those sailors gather around another fire beside another unfamiliar beach. One repairs a torn sail. Another sharpens a bronze knife. Someone begins telling a story. Perhaps about the strange island they visited last spring. Perhaps about a storm that nearly destroyed them. The younger crew members listen with wide eyes. Already, the tale grows. The waves become higher. The winds become fiercer. The escape becomes cleverer. Everyone laughs. No one objects. This is how stories survive. Not through perfect accuracy. Through perfect humanity. The old sailor smiles into the fire. He has learned something after decades at sea. People rarely remember exact distances. They remember emotions. They forget dates. They remember fear. They forget the number of days. They remember the moment the storm finally ended and the stars appeared once more overhead. Perhaps that is why the Odyssey has endured for nearly 3,000 years. Not because every adventure happened exactly as described, but because every emotion did. The longing for home. The exhaustion of endless travel. The relief of seeing familiar shores. The quiet joy of embracing family after years apart. Those things belong to every century. Not just the Bronze Age. As midnight deepens over Greece, the sea grows calm beneath countless stars. The same constellations that guided Mycenaean sailors still shimmer overhead. Orion stands above the eastern horizon. The Pleiades glitter softly. The Great Bear circles endlessly around the northern sky. A Bronze Age captain would recognize them immediately. So would a sailor from ancient Athens. So would a medieval navigator. So would we. Some things survive every collapse. Stone. Stars. And stories. The real world behind the Odyssey may have disappeared long ago. But every time someone looks up at those familiar constellations above a quiet sea, they briefly share the same night sky, as Odysseus once did. Or at least, the very real people whose lives inspired his unforgettable journey. The legacy of Mycenae, how a lost kingdom shaped the Western world. By now, the fire is little more than a circle of glowing coals. The palace has burned. The kings have vanished. The bronze swords have turned green beneath centuries of earth. The scribes have fallen silent. The merchants' ships have long since rotted into the sea they once crossed. And yet, somehow, Mycenaean Greece never truly disappeared. That may be the strangest part of its story. History often teaches us that civilizations die. Sometimes they do. But more often, they change their names. Imagine standing upon the Acropolis of Athens around the 5th century BC. Nearly 700 years have passed since the palaces fell. The Bronze Age feels impossibly distant. Athens is now becoming something entirely new. Philosophers debate beneath shaded colonnades. Artists carve marble statues unlike anything the Mycenaeans ever imagined. Democracy, imperfect and revolutionary, begins reshaping politics. Ships crowd the harbor at Piraeus. Playwrights write tragedies that will still be performed thousands of years later. The Greeks themselves now think of this as their golden age. Yet beneath their feet, the older world remains. Invisible. Foundational. The Athenians no longer build cyclopean fortresses. They no longer use linear B. Their armor has changed. Their language has evolved. Their gods even seem slightly different. But when they wish to understand courage, they still speak of Achilles. When they think of cleverness, they remember Odysseus. When they discuss tragic pride, Agamemnon returns. When they imagine loyalty, Penelope quietly resumes her endless weaving. The heroes of the Bronze Age have become moral companions, no longer merely ancestors. Teachers. Imagine a young Athenian boy learning to read. His teacher places a scroll before him. The first great work he studies is not philosophy, not politics, not science. It is Homer. Generation after generation, Greek children memorize passages from the Iliad and the Odyssey. The poems become something far greater than entertainment. They become education, ethics, identity, almost a shared national memory. Alexander the Great, centuries later, reportedly kept a copy of the Iliad close beside him during his campaigns. He admired Achilles. He dreamed of matching heroic glory. Imagine that for a moment. A Macedonian king marching across Asia carries the memory of a Mycenaean warrior who may have lived, or may have been inspired by someone who lived nearly 800 years earlier. Stories can travel farther than armies, farther than kingdoms, farther than empires. The Romans inherit those same stories. Virgil writes the Aeneid, giving Rome its own heroic ancestry by connecting it to the survivors of Troy. Suddenly, the Trojan War no longer belongs only to Greece. It belongs to Rome. Then medieval Europe inherits Rome. The Renaissance rediscovers Greece. Artists paint Helen. Sculptors carve Achilles. Poets quote Homer. Composers write operas. Painters imagine the fall of Troy with dramatic skies and impossible heroism. Even Shakespeare cannot entirely escape the shadow of Homer. Few civilizations have echoed so loudly for so long. Imagine walking through a modern museum. Perhaps in Athens. Perhaps London. Perhaps New York. Perhaps Berlin. Behind thick glass rests a gold drinking cup from Mycenae. Nearby lies a bronze sword whose edge has grown dull with time. A tiny clay tablet bears the faded signs of Linear B. Visitors pass quietly. Some glance only briefly. Others remain for long minutes. There is something deeply moving about standing only inches away from an object last touched by human hands 32 centuries ago. Someone made this. Someone carried it. Someone treasured it. Someone worried about losing it. Someone never imagined strangers from another age would stare at it with quiet fascination. History collapses astonishingly quickly inside museums. 3,000 years suddenly feel very small. The same feeling often arrives when visiting Mycenae itself. The road remains surprisingly peaceful. Olive trees still cover the surrounding hills. The dry scent of time drifts through warm air. Cicadas continue their endless summer chorus. The Lion Gate still waits. Visitors step through exactly as Bronze Age travelers once did. One by one. Slowly. Many instinctively lower their voices. Nobody asks them to. Ancient places encourage quiet. Perhaps because silence makes imagination easier. Stand beneath the massive limestone blocks. Run your fingers gently across stones shaped before the alphabet existed. Close your eyes. The wind continues exactly as it did thousands of years ago. Somewhere a bird calls. Footsteps echo softly. For just a moment, the centuries become strangely transparent. You almost expect to hear bronze armor. Almost expect servants hurrying toward the palace. Almost expect smoke rising from the great hearth inside the Megaron. Memory lingers in landscapes. Not literally. Emotionally. The place itself remembers. At least it feels as though it does. Modern archaeology continues uncovering new details every year. Tiny fragments of pottery. Seeds preserved in ancient storage jars. Animal bones revealing forgotten diets. Chemical traces inside ceramic vessels showing what people once drank. DNA from long-buried skeletons revealing family relationships. Even pollen trapped beneath ancient floors tells stories about forests that disappeared thousands of years ago. Every scientific discovery quietly restores another missing piece. History has become an extraordinary collaboration. Poets preserved memory. Archaeologists uncovered cities. Linguists deciphered forgotten writing. Geologists studied earthquakes. Climate scientists examined ancient droughts. Geneticists traced ancestry. No single discipline solved the mystery. Everyone contributed. Rather fitting, perhaps, because the Mycenaean world itself depended upon cooperation across enormous distances. One cannot help wondering what those ancient people would think if they knew. Imagine explaining modern archaeology to a Mycenaean palace scribe. Thousands of years from now, people will carefully examine your broken garbage. The scribe would probably look rather offended. My garbage? Yes. They're interested in rubbish? Very interested. What about the king? Also interesting. The gold? Certainly. But your discarded animal bones? Incredibly valuable. The broken cooking pots? Perhaps even more valuable. One suspects the scribe would conclude that future generations had become delightfully peculiar. He would not be entirely wrong. There is another irony. The Mycenaeans built enormous stone fortresses because they hoped to preserve power. What truly preserved them were stories. The walls survived remarkably well. The poems survived even better. Stone eventually crumbles. Language adapts. Empires dissolve. Yet every generation finds something familiar in Odysseus trying to reach home. Something recognizable in Hector defending his family. Something painfully human in Priam begging Achilles for his son's body. Those moments transcend archaeology. They belong to everyone. Perhaps that explains why the Mycenaean world continues capturing our imagination. It reminds us that history is never really about dates, or kings, or battles. Not primarily. History is about people trying to build meaningful lives inside uncertain worlds. The Mycenaeans loved, worked, argued, raised children, planted crops, feared storms, celebrated weddings, buried parents, dreamed of tomorrow. They simply happened to do so beneath cyclopean walls while sailing Browns built ships across the Aegean Sea. The details differ. The humanity does not. As the night grows deeper, the stars return once more above the hills of Mycenae. Exactly the same stars. Orion slowly climbs the eastern sky. The Pleiades shimmer like scattered diamonds. The Milky Way stretches overhead in quiet brilliance. A shepherd pauses beside his flock. A traveler studies the constellations. An archaeologist packs away careful notes after another day's excavation. 3,000 years separate them. The same sky unites them. And somewhere, if one listens carefully enough, perhaps beyond the whisper of the wind moving through ancient stones, perhaps beneath the endless chorus of cicadas, perhaps only inside the imagination, a storyteller begins again. Not because the tale is unfinished, but because great stories are never truly over. They simply wait for another listener. Another quiet evening. Another curious mind willing to walk once more through the Lion Gate and into the real world behind the Odyssey. The night is growing late. The palace fires have faded into memory. The bronze has turned to dust. But the story still sails across the wine-dark sea. Sleep well, traveler. The sea still remembers. And so, our journey comes to its quiet end. The torches inside the great Megaron have burned low. The palace musicians have long since set aside their lyres. The scribes have pressed their final symbols into damp clay. The bronze smith has allowed his forge to grow cold. The shepherd has gathered his flock. The sailors have pulled their ships safely onto a quiet beach. Even the restless sea, for one brief moment, seems content to whisper rather than roar. If you were standing above Mycenae tonight, the valley would look much as it did more than 3,000 years ago. The mountains would remain dark against the stars. Olive trees would sway gently beneath the evening breeze. Somewhere in the distance, an owl would call across the hills. The smell of wild thyme would drift through the cool air. The moon would paint the lion gate in pale silver. Time has changed almost everything. And almost nothing. The kings are gone. The walls remain. The palaces are empty. The hills are still alive. The language has changed. The stars have not. There is something strangely comforting about that. For all our technology, our satellites, our cities glowing through the night, we still look upward and see Orion standing where Bronze Age sailors once saw him. We still watch the Pleiades rise above the horizon. We still follow the same moon that guided Mycenaean shepherds home through the darkness. Perhaps we are not as far removed from them as we sometimes imagine. The people of Mycenaean Greece never knew they were living inside history. No one ever does. The woman grinding barley beside her doorway believed tomorrow would resemble yesterday. The sailor tightening a weathered rope expected another ordinary voyage. The palace scribe carefully counting jars of olive oil assumed another inventory would follow next month. The young prince practicing with his spear dreamed of glory, not archaeology. None of them imagined that, 3,000 years later, strangers from lands they could never have imagined would still speak of them, still wonder about them, still walk quietly through the ruins they left behind. History has a curious kindness. It forgets almost everyone's name. Yet somehow, it remembers what it felt like to be human. That is why the Odyssey still moves us. Not because we expect to meet Cyclopes, or hear sirens singing across the sea, but because every one of us understands what it means to long for home, to lose friends, to face storms we never expected, to hope that somewhere beyond the horizon, someone is waiting for us. That part never grows old. Perhaps that is Homer's greatest gift. He did not preserve perfect history. No poet could. He preserved perfect emotion. The facts belong to archaeologists. The feelings belong to everyone. Tonight we have wandered through forgotten palaces, walked beneath impossible walls, crossed the wine-dark sea with Bronze Age sailors, sat beside village fires listening to stories that would one day become immortal. We have watched kingdoms rise, watched them fall, watched memory quietly transform into legend, and then watched legend slowly become history once more. There is a quiet symmetry in that. The Mycenaeans believed stories could outlive kingdoms. They were right. Long after bronze crumbled into green fragments, long after cedar roofs collapsed beneath winter rains, long after kings became little more than uncertain names, the stories kept sailing. Across Greece, across Rome, across medieval monasteries, across Renaissance libraries, across museums, across classrooms, across generations, until tonight, they reach you. Perhaps that is the real voyage of the Odyssey. Not Odysseus crossing the sea, but memory crossing time. Every listener becomes another harbor. Every storyteller launches the ship once more. And somewhere, in the silence between one generation and the next, the old world continues breathing. Not loudly, not dramatically, just enough to remind us that no civilization is ever entirely lost while someone still remembers its story. So now, the palace grows quiet. The hearth has become warm ash. The guards upon the walls have gone home. The sea continues its endless conversation with the shore. Above it all, the stars keep their ancient watch. Exactly as they did when the first Mycenaean sailor looked upward and wondered what waited beyond the horizon. Perhaps that sailor found a distant kingdom. Perhaps only another storm. Perhaps both. That has always been the nature of journeys. And now, your own journey through the Bronze Age has reached its peaceful shore. So let your thoughts drift like one last ship upon the calm Aegean. Leave the Lion Gate behind you. Leave the ruined palaces to the moonlight. Leave the kings to history. Leave the poets to their songs. The sea will remember. The stones will wait. The stars will keep shining. And somewhere, carried softly upon the night wind, a storyteller is already beginning again. There was once a kingdom. Good night. Sleep well. And may gentle seas carry you safely home. End of documentary.